Chapter 375. Li Mu had already prepared to return to his room to sleep. When he heard Lu Hanyan's words, he suddenly quivered and hurriedly said, "What are you talking about?" Lu Hanyan glanced at him and said, "Men shouldn't interrupt when women are talking." A trace of nervousness and panic flashed in the depths of Li Qing's eyes. However, after she met Lu Hanyan's gaze, that trace of panic gradually turned into calmness and indifference. She remembered what Li Si said before she left Yangqiu County. Li Si said that in terms of relationships, it was always easier to take a step back than to take a step forward. If she took a step back now and regretted it in the future, she would have to take more than one step forward. By the time she regretted it, someone would have already walked in front of her. In fact, she regretted it, but it was already too late because someone had already walked in front of her. Li Qing looked at Lu Hanyan and said calmly, "Yes, I have liked him since a long time ago. However, senior sister, don't worry. I won't fight with you for anything. I will leave tomorrow morning." She wanted to deny it against her will, but if she denied it this time, she would never have the chance to say it again. Li Mu looked at Li Qing with an indescribable feeling in his heart. Lu Hanyan sighed softly and said, "Actually, the one who should leave is me. This is your home. The person he liked in the beginning was also you. I just took advantage of the situation." Li Qing shook her head and said, "This is my own choice. I should also bear the consequences. The person who has always been by his side is you. This is no longer my home. Its owner is you. I hope that the two of you can be united and grow old together." Lu Hanyan asked, "What about you?" Li Qing thought for a moment and said, "I will stay in Baiyun Mountain and repay the sect's kindness." Lu Hanyan was silent for a moment and said, "The one you should repay the most is not the sect, but a certain someone." Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan. For a moment he couldn't figure out her routine. Li Qing nodded and said, "If you need me to do anything, I won't refuse." Lu Hanyan looked at her and said, "Then give yourself to me." Li Qing looked at her with a stunned expression. Li Mu looked at her, dumbfounded. Li Qing came back to her senses and said in disbelief, "You, what are you talking about?" Lu Hanyan's expression was melancholy, and her tone was somewhat helpless. She continued, "Although I don't want to share my husband with others, it's not that I can't accept it if that person is you. After all, you're in front of me. A man can't forget the first woman he likes in his entire life. While he's with other women, he still has to think about an outsider. Why not let him think about his own sisters? You're not the first and you're not the only one." Li Qing's lips moved. Her thoughts were in a mess. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Qing and said, "Of course, you can also refuse. That way, I won't feel guilty towards you at all. It's not that I stole your husband. It's you who didn't want him, and you didn't want him twice. In the future, don't go around telling people that I, Lu Hanyan, am not moral." After Li Qing came back to her senses, her pale face had turned red. She whispered, Give me some time." After saying that, she quickly turned around and hurried into her room. Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan in front of him and opened his mouth. Lu Hanyan glanced at him and said, "I'll give you an hour at most. Then come to my room." Seeing her turn around and leave, Li Mu was stunned for a long time. In the end, he pinched his thigh to make sure that what had just happened was not a dream. If this was not a dream, then happiness came too suddenly. After coming back to his senses, he slowly walked to the door of Li Qing's room. Her door was not closed. Li Mu walked in and saw her sitting on the edge of the bed with her head bowed. Li Mu did not say anything. He just silently walked to her side and sat down. The two of them sat in silence. After a while, Li Qing slowly leaned her head on Li Mu's shoulder. This was the closest she had been to Li Mu since they met. Li Qing softly said, "Actually, when we were in the Imperial Clan Temple, I wanted to lean on you like this." Li Mu put his arm around her shoulder and said, "You can lean on me for a lifetime." Li Qing did not say anything else. She quietly leaned on him for a while and then said, "Go to senior sister's place. Right now, she needs you more than I do." Li Mu nodded slightly and said, "I'll watch you rest." Li Qing lay on the bed and covered herself with the quilt. She looked at Li Mu and said, "Go." Li Mu walked out of her room and helped her close the door. Li Qing, who was lying on the bed, slowly opened her beautiful eyes and softly said, "Father, mother, did you see that? Qing also has someone to rely on." Li Mu walked into Lu Hanyan's room. Lu Hanyan was sitting on the bed. She did not raise her head and asked, "She agreed?" Li Mu did not answer. He walked to her side and asked, "Why did you?" Lu Hanyan unhappily said, "If I don't ask her, should I wait for you to ask her? At that time, the one who will be angry will be me. So why don't I ask her myself?" Li Mu said, "What I mean is, why did you suddenly do this?" Lu Hanyan looked at him and said, "It's not sudden. From the day she appeared in Shindu, I thought about it. Your feelings for her are not something I can compare to. If you run away with her one day, what should I do?" Li Mu said indignantly, "What are you talking about? You are my legal wife. How can I run away with someone else?" Lu Hanyan asked, "So if you had to choose between her and me, who would you choose?" Li Mu thought for a while and asked tentatively, "Can I have them both? Hey, don't bite me." After a long time, Lu Hanyan leaned into Li Mu's arms and said, "Anyway, I already have Wan and Xiaobai. It doesn't matter if she has one more. If it was someone else, she could forget about marrying into the Li family. But she is Li Qing." She buried her head in Li Mu's chest and said, "Let me tell you, I have already married Li Qing for you. You can't abandon me for any reason in the future, any." As she spoke, her voice became softer. The calmness and confidence she had when facing Li Qing just now had disappeared. Li Mu's clothes were wet from her tears. At this moment, Li Mu finally understood what she had been worried about these days. The experience of being abandoned by her parents when she was young had caused her trauma. Even now, it had not healed. Li Mu hugged her tightly and said seriously, "I will never abandon you, never." Changle Palace. Zhou read several memorials. Suddenly, she raised her head and asked, "Where is Li Mu? Didn't he go to the minister's department today? I didn't see him in the morning court." Mr. May said, "I really didn't see him today." Zhou thought for a while and put down her brush. She said, "He didn't go to court for no reason. I want to see what he is doing." She flicked her finger, and a picture appeared in front of her. In the picture, it seemed to be a street in Chengdu. The street was full of people. There was a beautiful woman on each side of Li Mu. He was holding the woman on the left and the woman on the right. Mr. May looked at the picture in front of him and said in surprise, "Isn't that woman Li Yi's daughter? He and Li Mu?" Zhou snorted and said, "I knew it. Their relationship is not that simple. He goes to Zongjing Temple every day more frequently than he comes to Changle Palace. He didn't want the palace maids I gave him before. I thought he didn't like women. Now it seems that all men in the world are the same." Mr. May said awkwardly, "He is so outstanding. Naturally, there are more people who like him. It's understandable that both parties are willing." Zhou waved her hand to disperse the picture. She was a little annoyed. Li Mu had another wife. This meant that he would come to Changle Palace less often. It was only the first day, and he didn't even go to court. On the streets of Chengdu, the people looked at the three figures in front of them and whispered, "Isn't that Li Yi? Who is he with?" The one on Li Yi's left is Madame Li. The one on the right seems to be Li Yi's daughter. Why is Li Yi holding her hand? Is there a need to ask? Li Yi overturned the case for Li Yi and saved Miss Li from prison. She was touched and wanted to marry him. It's normal. This is also a good story. It can be written into a play. They are a perfect match. No wonder Li Yi said he wouldn't let Li Yi have no descendants. So this is what he meant. Now Li Yi really has a descendant. Chapter 376. In the past 3 days, Li Mu had developed a feeling that life was more beautiful than this. He even thought of resigning from his position and living in seclusion. Returning to Baiyun Mountain, he could focus on cultivation and enjoy the happiness of having 2 wives. Wouldn't that be perfect? The reason why he gave up on this idea was because he thought of the Empress. Even if he were to leave, it would be after helping the Empress clear all obstacles and repaying her for recognizing his worth. Of course, he also wanted to take revenge on his father-in-law. Although the case had caused a stir and the whole country knew about it, the outcome was not satisfactory. The main culprits were all pardoned by the death exemption medallion. Only one of them received the punishment he deserved. As for the other accomplices, the 3 provinces only fined them a few months of their salary to maintain the stability of the court. It seemed that the price of framing a 4th-rank official was only a few months of salary. As far as they were concerned, this matter was already over. But for Li Mu, it was just the beginning. He stretched out his hand. The ring on his finger flashed and a booklet appeared in his hand. It was the evidence of the crimes of some of the officials of the old party that Zhou Zhong had collected over the years. Most of these people were the ones who joined forces to frame Li Yi. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, and deeply trusted by the old party, it was easy for him to use his position to collect the evidence. The crimes of these people varied. Li Mu took out a piece of paper and wrote down a series of names. After thinking for a while, he circled one of them. Wang Luan, who was the minister of the Ministry of Personnel at that time, was the one who submitted many memorials asking for Li Qing to be severely punished. Li Mu was not holding a grudge, but there were so many people that he had to start with. He left the secretariat, walked out of the palace gate, and walked toward the Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office of the Ministry of Justice, Yang Lin leaned comfortably on a chair and sighed in his heart. He had thought that he would have to endure for many more years to reach the position of assistant minister before he retired. But who would have thought that the Ministry of Justice would undergo such a great change? Countless people were eyeing the position, but in the end he took advantage of it. Yang Lin's gaze inadvertently looked out of the window. A figure flashed by outside the window. Yang Lin immediately stood up from his chair and walked to the door. Lord Li, do you have any instructions for the Ministry of Justice? Although his rank was already higher than Li Mu's, in the imperial court, rank did not represent everything. In front of Li Mu, he still maintained his respect and humility. Li Mu handed him a document and said, "There is a case here. The Ministry of Justice should deal with it as soon as possible." The Central Secretariat had to do with national policies or important decisions. They needed to be reviewed by the Minister of Ceremonies, and the Minister of Ceremonies to guide the 6 ministries in their implementation. For such small matters, the Central Secretariat officials had the power to directly order the Ministry of Justice. Yang Lin took the document. After reading it, he said in shock, "This is the Ministry of Personnel's physician, Lord Wang Lun." Li Mu looked at him and asked, "Why? Does the Ministry of Justice's handling of cases vary from person to person?" Yang Lin quickly replied, "Of course not." Li Mu said, "I believe that Lord Yang will be a good official. Otherwise, I wouldn't have urged His Majesty to let you be the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice." Yang Lin was stunned. He had thought that his appointment as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice was due to the efforts of the old faction. He was still puzzled as to why the old faction did not get a single official position in the Ministry of Personnel, but he succeeded in the Ministry of Justice. Only now did he know that his promotion was not because of the old faction, but because of Li Mu. He immediately clasped his hands and said, "Thank you, Lord Li." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No need to thank me." His Majesty felt that Lord Yang was not too far off the path, and wanted to give you a chance. Yang Lin stood where he was. His gaze gradually became hesitant. He knew that at this moment, he was faced with an important choice in his life. Should he continue to work for the old faction? Or should he completely side with Li Mu? The old faction was controlled by the Xiao clan, and the Xiao clan was the legitimate royal family of Great Zhou. Even though the Zhou clan was extremely powerful, they were not the legitimate royal family. Many officials in the court, and the people of Great Zhou were inclined towards the empress returning the throne to the Zhou clan. Therefore, even though the old faction had been suppressed by the new faction in recent years, they were still powerful and did not lack supporters. He worked for the old faction because he believed that the Xiao clan would regain power sooner or later. However, what reason did he have to work for Li Mu? His Majesty could not pass the throne to Li Mu, or Li Mu's children. Yang Lin did not dare to make a rash decision when it concerned his future, and even his life. He looked at Li Mu and probed, "Lord Li, may I ask if His Majesty intends to pass the throne to the Zhou clan in the future?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Is this something that you and I as subjects can discuss?" Yang Lin looked troubled. Li Mu knew what he was worried about. He said, Are you afraid that the Shao clan will come after you if His Majesty passes the throne to the Shao clan? Yang Lin said, Lord Li, I have elders and children to take care of. I cannot afford to gamble. If I gamble wrongly, the lives of my family, Li Mu asked. When do you think His Majesty will pass the throne to the Shao clan? Yang Lin shook his head and said, I don't know. Li Mu said slowly, His Majesty is a powerhouse of the seventh realm. He can live for at least 3 decades. She is in her prime now. Even if the throne is to be passed, it will be decades or even centuries later. Do you think you can live until then? Yang Lin thought for a moment, and felt that Li Mu's words seemed to make sense. By that time, he would have retired and returned to his hometown to enjoy the rest of his life. It would have nothing to do with him who would inherit the throne. However, he still did not dare to gamble. He asked Li Mu nervously, His Majesty won't pass the throne early, right? Li Mu glanced at him and said, Do you think His Majesty will suddenly pass the throne? Yang Lin looked at Li Mu in a daze, seeming to understand something. If it was said that His Majesty had such thoughts in the past, he would not find it strange. In the past, His Majesty did not care about the court at all. He did not care about the struggles between the old and new parties. He let nature take its course. However, the appointments of the officials from the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Justice showed that His Majesty was already deliberately suppressing the old and new parties and taking back power. Could it be that His Majesty had other thoughts? Li Mu looked at him and said, I know that it is very difficult for Lord Yang to make a decision. I will give you 3 days to think about it. After 3 days, whether we are friends or enemies will depend on your choice. Yang Lin's expression was bitter. Did he have any other choice? Although Li Mu did not have many friends in the court, he was really good to his friends. In just half a year, Zhang Chun had been promoted from the Divine Capital Commandant to the Left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was a real minister with real power. The residence he lived in also went from 2, 3, and now 4. He was about to live in a large residence with 5 entrances. For Yang Lin, who lived in a small house with 2 entrances for 3 generations, a residence with 5 entrances was an unattainable dream. On the other hand, Li Mu's enemies were either dead or demoted. Those who were lucky enough to survive lost their positions and reputation. Yang Lin did not doubt that if he became Li Mu's enemy, he would not even be able to live in a small house with 2 entrances in less than a month. The prison of the Ministry of Justice was perhaps the best outcome. If it was a little worse, he might only have a few coffin planks to block the dirt. After careful consideration, Yang Lin let out a long sigh. Then his expression gradually turned solemn. He looked at Li Mu and said seriously, From now on, this humble official will follow Lord Li's lead. Li Mu did not misjudge him. The person he supported did not disappoint him. Not long after, a few constables from the Ministry of Justice hurried out of the Ministry of Justice's main gate. They came to a certain entertainment market and grabbed a certain noble from a brothel. Which yamen are you from? How dare you arrest me? Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is? The Ministry of Justice, the current Assistant Minister of Justice, is my father's friend. Let me go. Once you get to the Ministry of Justice, you will suffer. The noble made a lot of noise along the way. The constables from the Ministry of Justice could not take it anymore, and used a rag to gag his mouth. The people along the way found out that the noble had been summoned by the Ministry of Justice because of an old case. This is the son of Lord Wang of the Ministry of Personnel. Why is the Ministry of Justice arresting them? Aren't the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Justice on the same side? That was in the past. Now the Minister and Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel have changed. The Ministry of Personnel's Assistant Minister hasn't changed. He has some ties with the current Assistant Minister of Justice. Could it be that their relationship has broken? The people always like to watch the drama between officials and nobles. They followed along the way. Ministry of Personnel. It was lunchtime. A few officials from the Ministry of Personnel walked out together and prepared to eat at a restaurant. When they passed by the Ministry of Justice, they saw a large group of people gathered outside the Ministry of Justice. They were discussing and pointing inside. One of the officials from the Ministry of Personnel lamented, The Ministry of Justice is really busy. They can't even rest during lunchtime. Another official from the Ministry of Personnel said, "When we were on our way here, we heard from the people that some official's son was arrested. The Ministry of Justice took him out of the brothel directly. It seems like the crime is not small." When they heard that some official's son had committed a crime, the officials from the Ministry of Personnel were instantly interested in watching the drama. The Ministry of Personnel's physician Wang Luan chuckled and said, "I wonder which family's son is from. He keeps causing trouble for his elders. It's time to teach him a lesson." He looked into the Ministry of Justice's main hall and saw a figure kneeling in the hall. The figure looked so familiar. One of the officials said in surprise, "Lord Wang, isn't this your?" Wang Luan was stunned for a moment. Then his face gradually darkened. He did not expect that he would be involved in the drama. Chapter 377. Under the curious gazes of several officials from the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Luan strode into the Ministry of Justice. He met Yang Lin at the Assistant Minister's office. Wang Luan looked at Yang Lin and frowned. "Lord Yang, what's going on?" Yang Lin said helplessly, "You'll have to ask young Master Wang. 3 years ago, he pursued a married woman. In order to force the woman to submit, he beat her husband until he was severely injured. In the end, he even used his power to fabricate a crime and sent her husband to prison. Today, the Ministry of Justice has ordered the Ministry of Justice to reopen the case. After the Ministry of Justice investigated, they found that it was true." Wang Luan gritted his teeth. "Wasn't the case from 3 years ago already closed?" Yang Lin said. Although the case from 3 years ago was closed, the Ministry of Justice felt that the Ministry of Justice had handled the case unfairly and requested a retrial. "I couldn't do anything about it." Wang Luan asked, "Can't the original verdict be upheld?" Yang Lin shook his head. "No. The Ministry of Justice was dissatisfied with the original verdict, so they decided to reopen the case. If the Ministry of Justice still doesn't change it, then I'll be the unlucky one." Wang Luan said angrily, "Why do you have to reopen the case from 3 years ago?" Yang Lin looked at him. "You'll have to ask Lord Wang about this." Wang Luan was stunned. "Ask me? What's wrong with me?" Yang Lin sighed and said, "That day, I told you not to meddle in that matter, but you sent several memorials in a row, insisting that Li Yi's daughter be killed. Now, that woman has become one of Li Mu's lovers. If he doesn't take revenge on you, who else can he take revenge on?" Wang Luan said, "I didn't follow the royal prince's orders," Yang Lin said. "That's why your son is here today." Wang Luan took a deep breath and asked, "Then what will happen to my son?" Yang Lin shook his head. "It's hard to say. He caused serious injuries, slandered and framed innocent people, and sent them to prison. He'll be punished for several crimes. Your Wang family might have to pay a lot of money. You won't be able to avoid prison," Wang Luan said. "I know that the law can be bent. Lord Yang, with our relationship, you have to help me." Yang Lin thought for a moment and said, "You can ask Manager Wei to defend your son. He is the most familiar with the law in the Ministry of Justice. Perhaps he can help your son fight for a reduced sentence." A moment later, in a certain office of the Ministry of Justice, Wang Luan held Wei Peng's hand and said, "Manager Wei, I'll leave my son to you. After the matter is completed, I will definitely reward you handsomely." Wei Peng nodded and said, "I'll try my best." With that, he slowly walked into the courtroom. Wang Luan asked Yang Lin, "How will the Ministry of Justice judge him this time?" Yang Lin thought for a moment, then said, "Inflicting serious injuries and setting someone up to be imprisoned for 3 years. The fine is at least 200 taels of silver, and this is under the condition that the other party is willing to forgive you. In addition, at least 5 years of imprisonment is unavoidable. As for how much you can reduce, it will depend on Manager Wei's performance." About 15 minutes later, Wei Peng slowly walked out of the court. Wang Luan asked, "What were the results?" Wei Peng said, "Forget it." Wang Luan was pleasantly surprised. "His sentence has been waived?" Wei Peng said, "The fine is waived. He was only sentenced to 20 years of imprisonment." Wang Luan was stunned for a moment. When he came to his senses, he grabbed Wei Peng's collar and said through clenched teeth, "What did you say?" Just how did you argue? Yang Lin hurriedly said. Lord Wang, watch your actions. Your actions. He had just finished speaking when several figures walked into the Ministry of Justice. They looked at Wang Luan and asked, Are you the director of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Luan? Wang Luan was furious. He said unhappily, I am. Who are you people? Crack. Two of them pressed down on Wang Luan's arms. Another person put shackles on his wrists and said, The Imperial Clan Temple has investigated. In the past few years, you have abused your power for personal gain many times. When evaluating officials, you were severely unfair. In addition, in order to get your son off the hook, you used your position as the director of the Ministry of Personnel to put pressure on the Ministry of Justice. This is also a serious violation of the law. Come with us to the Imperial Clan Temple. Wang Luan said in horror. What are you saying? I am an official of the Imperial Court. You have no right to do this. You still know that you are an official of the Imperial Court? The official from the Imperial Clan Temple glanced at him. He waved his hand and said, Knowingly breaking the law. This is an additional charge. Take him away. Seeing Wang Luan being taken away, Yang Lin sighed and said, I told you long ago not to stand up for others when you shouldn't. You just wouldn't listen. Outside the Ministry of Justice, the officials from the Ministry of Personnel were dumbfounded. Everything was fine in the morning. They had just come out for lunch, and the director was taken away. The onlooking commoners were also discussing. This family, both the father and son were arrested. What a sin! The father committed a sin, and the son committed an even greater sin. They could have been released after a few years as compensation. Now they have been locked up for 20 years. When will they be released? Manager Wei's defense is really amazing. This is nothing. Just last month, there was a murderer who was sentenced to be banished to the army. His family spent a lot of money to hire Manager Wei to defend him. Guess what happened? What happened? He was just executed yesterday. In a room on duty in the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng was writing a file. Yang Lin stood in front of the table and asked, You have a grudge with Wang Luan's son, right? Wei Peng nodded and said, We had a conflict before. Yang Lin said, Be careful in the future. It's best not to bring personal grudges into official matters. Wei Peng said, This official understands. Yang Lin shook his head and left. Because of the delay just now, the brush in Wei Peng's hand had been suspended in the air for too long. A drop of ink fell onto the half-finished file and quickly dyed it red, leaving behind a blob of ink. Wei Peng looked at the blob of ink and said in a low voice, Come back. The blob of ink on the file quickly shrank and formed a blob of ink. It floated in the air and landed back on the brush. The paper was as clean as new. Compared to the demotion of the Minister of Personnel and the left and right assistant ministers, the imprisonment of a mere director of the Ministry of Personnel did not attract much attention. However, to the officials of the old party, this matter was worth paying attention to. Times had changed. In the past, they were in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. However, the director of the Ministry of Personnel was now the highest-ranking official in the Ministry of Personnel. Losing one of the two directors of the Ministry of Personnel was a great loss to them. In a certain residence in the southern courtyard, a secret meeting was taking place. Why did something suddenly happen to Wang Luan? I've asked Yang Lin. He's under the orders of the Secretariat. It should be Li Mu who's behind this. Wang Luan once received my order to persuade the Imperial Court to execute Li Mu's daughter. Now, I heard that Li Yi's daughter is living in Li Mu's house and is very close to him. Perhaps she has already become his woman. He's taking revenge. After a long silence, someone sighed and said in an unwilling tone, In my opinion, we shouldn't provoke Li Mu for the time being. He has the Empress protection and doesn't reveal any flaws. We can't do anything to him, and there's no need to fight to the death with him. Don't forget that we only have one opponent. As long as we defeat the Zhou family, no one will be a threat to us. Someone sighed and said, Now I'm afraid it's not about whether we should provoke Li Mu or not, but whether he should provoke us. If Li Yi's daughter is already his woman, then Li Yi is his father-in-law. It's very likely that he wants to avenge Li Yi. Hasn't he already overturned the verdict for Li Yi? Overturning the verdict is not revenge. Judging from Wang Luan's case, this person will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Since he took action against Wang Luan so quickly, I'm afraid he won't let the others off easily. As soon as he finished speaking, someone knocked on the door from outside. He walked over and opened the door. A servant whispered a few words to him. When he walked into the room, his face was very gloomy. He said, in addition to the left physician of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Luan, the right physician of the Ministry of Personnel, Shui Yan, was also taken away by the people of the Imperial Clan Temple. Preposterous. Commandery Prince Nanyang slapped the table and stood up abruptly. He said angrily, "What is he trying to do?" In the Li residence, Li Mu held Li Qing's hand and said, "Those people from back then, don't even think about escaping." Lu Hanyan glanced at Li Mu and coughed softly. Li Qing let go of Li Mu's hand in a panic. Although the three of them had reached a tacit understanding on some matters, she was much more thin-skinned. In a situation where there was a third person present, she was still not used to being intimate with Li Mu. Li Mu held Li Qing's hand in his left hand and Lu Hanyan's hand in his right. It was not easy to enjoy the happiness of having two wives. If they could not be impartial, it was only a matter of time before the harem caught fire. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Qing and asked Li Mu, "When do you plan to officially welcome her into the Li residence? We have to prepare in advance." Li Qing shook her head and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble." Although Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were both women, their understanding of marriage was completely different. Lu Hanyan's heart was still that of a secular woman. She hoped to have a romantic and ritualistic wedding. Li Qing entered the Fulu school when she was very young. She had the carefree and casual nature of a cultivator. When cultivators practiced dual cultivation, as long as the two of them were willing, they could enter the bridal chamber at that time and skip all the tedious procedures. Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "That won't do. If others know, they will think that I have mistreated you." Li Qing insisted, "There's really no need. As long as the three of us can be together forever, that's enough." "Three?" Lu Hanyan looked at Li Qing and seemed to realize something. She looked at her with a strange expression and asked, "Junior sister, you don't think that Wanwan and Xiaobai are just our maids, do you?" Chapter 378. Li Qing went back to her room alone to calm down. Lu Hanyan had a gloating expression on her face. Li Mu smacked her butt and said, "You did it on purpose, didn't you?" Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "I just wanted her to experience my feelings. Besides, she will find out sooner or later. If I don't tell her, will you tell her yourself?" The eldest madam of the Li family did it for revenge. Because of Li Qing, she had cried a lot in the past. Li Qing had wronged her, so she wanted to use Wanwan and Xiaobai to take revenge. She was still the petty Lu Hanyan, but she was also the Lu Hanyan that Li Mu liked. For many things, it was more appropriate for her to speak to Li Qing than Li Mu. After thinking this through, Li Mu put his arm around her and rubbed the place where he had just hit her. He said, "Does it hurt?" Lu Hanyan blushed and slapped his hand away. She said, "Behave yourself. Wanwan and Xiaobai are still over there." Li Mu looked over. The two girls who were sitting together on the swing immediately covered their faces with their hands. Their eyes peeked through the gaps between their fingers. Li Mu moved his hand away and said angrily, "Children shouldn't poke their noses into adult affairs. I'm not a child anymore. I'm not a child anymore." Wanwan and Xiaobai tried to defend themselves. Li Mu waved his hand and said, Go back to your room to play." Although they were not young in some areas, they were still under 18 years old. As long as they were not over 18 years old, in Li Mu's eyes, they were different from Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. Li Mu could hold Xiaobai's original body, but as long as she transformed, he would feel guilty. Wanwan was the same. She had not changed much in the past 2 years. She was still greedy and playful. The only change was that her eyes were more seductive. As long as one looked into her eyes, one's soul would be sucked in. Little White and Wanwan were soul seducers and soul catchers respectively. When the two beauties worked together, even Li Mu could not withstand them sometimes. Li Qing was alone in the room. Lu Hanyan was full of satisfaction after getting her revenge. She went to the great music bar to find her friends. She planned to buy the whole place and was discussing the price with the owner. Li Mu had nothing to do, so he watched Wan Wan and Xiao Bai play aeroplane chess in the courtyard. Before the game, they had agreed that the loser would have to warm the bed next time Li Mu slept in the study. Li Mu watched for almost an hour. They were still playing aeroplane chess. While he was bored to death, something in the space of the flask heaven suddenly moved. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and the spiritual snail appeared in his hand. Come to the Changle Palace. Only this sentence came from the spiritual snail, and then there was no more sound. In the past few days he couldn't even take care of his family. He was immersed in his women and completely forgot about the Empress. 15 minutes later, Li Mu appeared in the Changle Palace. He bowed and asked, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" The Empress threw him a token and said, "From now on you are the Deputy Commander of the Bamboo Guards. You will be in charge of the Bamboo Guards together with Ali." The Empress had 4 internal guards. Their names were Mei Lan, Zhu, and Zhu. The 4 guards had different names, and their functions were also different. The Mei guards were in Shendu. They were in charge of monitoring the officials. The commander was Mr. Mei. The Lan guards were scattered in various counties. Their job was to monitor the local officials. Li Mu had never seen their commander before. The Bamboo Guards were a special operation organization. They were in charge of carrying out special tasks, such as investigating rebels under the Empress orders. The commander was Shangguan Li. The Zhu guards were the most mysterious of the 4 guards. It was said that they were in charge of intelligence. They had spies and spies in the Demon Nation, the Ghost Realm, and even the Demon Sect. Li Mu took the token and didn't waste any time. He said, "Yes, Your Majesty." He was very clear about his position. He was a brick. He would be wherever the Empress wanted him to be. However, the Empress had inexplicably summoned him here, and only gave him a token. After that, there was nothing else. She could have asked Lord Mei to pass this token to him. There was no need for her to make a special trip. After taking the token, Li Mu didn't stay for long. He walked out of Changle Palace and said to Shangguan Li, "Commander Shangguan, I have other things to do during this time. I'll need you to take care of the Bamboo Guards." Shangguan Li said lightly, "When you're not here, I'm the only one in charge of the Bamboo Guards." Since Shangguan Li didn't have any objections, Li Mu could focus on his own matters. After leaving Changle Palace, he went straight back to Changle Palace. Zhou looked at the pile of memorials on the table and said, "Look, there's only one more woman by their side, and they don't even care about national affairs. They don't go to the imperial kitchen, and they don't come to Changle Palace. I should forbid them from taking concubines." Seeing that the Empress's attitude towards Li Mu was becoming more and more strange, Mr. Mei's face was bitter, but he couldn't say anything. In the Imperial Secretariat, Li Mu sneezed for no reason, and crossed out 2 names on the list on the table. Louis walked in from outside, and put a few oranges on the table in front of Li Mu. He smiled and said, "Sir Li, these are oranges from my hometown. Although they're not as sweet and delicious as the tribute oranges, they still taste pretty good. You can take them back and try them." Zhongjuan didn't produce oranges. In the past, there were people who transplanted them and used their mana to carefully cultivate them. However, the fruit was small and bitter, so no one tried it again. This kind of fruit was usually transported from the southern counties. The price was ridiculously high, and it wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Li Mu smiled and said, "Thank you, Sir Lu." Louis had eaten Li Mu's tribute oranges before, so he only came to return the favor. He said, "You're welcome." He was about to leave when he saw a piece of paper on Li Mu's table. He asked, "What's this?" Li Mu said casually, "Oh, this. I have nothing to do, so I practice writing." "Sir Li is really elegant." Louis smiled and complimented him. He left Li Mu's office, but he couldn't help but be curious. Who would practice writing using a person's name? Wang Luan, Qianlong, seemed to be the left and right doctors of the Ministry of Rights. The names after that, Aitong, Wusheng, Chenguang, sounded familiar. They seemed to be the officials of the Imperial Court, Morning Court. A few days ago, the Imperial Court was in turmoil. And there was a big change that hadn't been seen for many years. Today, the change that affected countless officials finally calmed down. The morning court regained its tranquility. But soon, some officials found that the court today seemed to be too quiet, as if there were suddenly a lot of people missing. Some of the officials looked around and saw that there were indeed some empty seats in front, behind, left, and right. In the Ziwei Palace, the positions of the officials were fixed. The 3 provinces, 6 ministries, and 9 temples. The ministers, assistant ministers, doctors, ministers, and junior ministers all had their own positions. These positions were fixed. Every morning, it was clear who was absent. Today there were many gaps in the neat line of officials. There were no empty seats for officials above the 4th rank in front of the palace. But starting from the middle of the palace, there were more empty seats for officials. There was almost 1 empty seat for every 2 people. In total, there were more than 20 officials who didn't come to the morning court today. Even if they asked for leave, it was impossible for 20 officials to ask for leave at the same time. Moreover, the officials in those officials' offices didn't have the approval of their superiors. What's going on? Where did Lord Ai go? Why didn't Lord Wu come? Lord Chen just took a concubine yesterday. Did he get up late? Lord Wang and Lord Qian didn't come. Lord Wang and Lord Qian were arrested yesterday. What happened to the others? Were they arrested too? Ai Tong Wusheng, Chen Guang. Louis stood in front and listened to the officials' discussion behind him. He was a little confused. The names of these absent officials sounded familiar, as if he had seen them somewhere. Soon he remembered where this inexplicable sense of familiarity came from. Weren't these people the officials Li Mu used to practice calligraphy? But even if Li Mu used their names to practice calligraphy, it shouldn't be to the extent that they disappeared. Could it be that he wasn't practicing calligraphy, but using a divine ability? He had never heard of a divine ability that could make people disappear just by writing their names. Combined with the strange situation in the court, Louis quickly understood. That piece of paper wasn't used by Li Mu to practice calligraphy. It was a list of names. On that list were the names of the former Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Gao Hong, the former Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Duke of Nanyang, Xiaoyan. Louis finally realized something and was shocked. He turned around to look at Li Mu. Li Mu grinned at him. Louis immediately turned around and broke out in cold sweat. His mind was racing. His name didn't seem to be on that list. It shouldn't be. He even treated Li Mu to Orange's southern court, Gao residence. Early in the morning, the gatekeeper of the Gao residence was taking a nap in the side room. Ever since his master was stripped of his official position, although fewer people came to the residence, he no longer needed to attend morning court. In the past, he would have to wake up early to open the door at this time. It wasn't like today, where he could still laze around and take a nap at this time. To him, it was a good thing that his master was in trouble. Being able to sleep in the morning made life even better. Bang, bang, bang. While he was daydreaming, there was a sudden rush of knocking on the door. The gatekeeper was pleasantly surprised. After a shiver, he was no longer sleepy. He walked to the door and shouted angrily, "Why are you knocking so early in the morning when someone died in the house?" This person was extremely rude when knocking on the door. Normal people would pay attention to the gentle knocks and pauses when knocking on the door. Only those who were announcing a death would knock so quickly. The knocking stopped and a voice came from outside. "I'm here to visit Lord Gao." Hearing the words "I'm here," the gatekeeper was already looking down on him. His anger hadn't subsided and he asked coldly, "Do you have something to say?" The person outside was stunned for a moment, then said, "No." The gatekeeper said coldly, "If you don't have an appointment, bring the invitation when you do." The person outside said, "But I really have something urgent." The gatekeeper said, "No matter how urgent it is, you still have to make an appointment. This is Lord Gao's rule." The person outside the door said, "Can you make an exception?" The gatekeeper said rudely, "I can't make an exception." The person outside the door finally became angry and said coldly, "If you can't make an exception, then forget it. Men, prepare the explosive talismans." Chapter 379. Boom. The 2 explosive talismans pasted on the gates of the Gao mansion exploded under the control of his transcendence energy. With a loud bang, the 2 gates of the Gao mansion collapsed. The gatekeeper of the Gao mansion stood in the courtyard and stared at the collapsed gates in a daze. His mind was blank. His master was a respected figure in the fairy's capital. Even if he was no longer the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he was still the elder brother of concubine Gao, a relative of the royal family. Who would be so bold as to blow up the gates of the Gao mansion? Zhang Chun stood outside the gate and waved at the officials of the imperial clan temple. "Follow me in and arrest the guilty official." The loud noise at the gates had already alerted the people of the Gao mansion. In a split second, more than 10 maids and servants rushed out from various places. As soon as they arrived at the front courtyard, they saw the collapsed gates of the Gao mansion. The former right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Gao Hong, rushed out of the inner court. Seeing that the main gate of his residence had been blasted open, he was enraged. He glared at Zhang Chun, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets as he snapped, "Zhang, what are you doing?" Gao Hong hated Zhang Chun to the core. Not only because Zhang Chun took his position as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, but also because Zhang Chun was Li Mu's #1 lackey. If you hated someone, you would naturally hate everything about that person, including his lackeys. Zhang Chun looked at Gao Hong and said calmly, "There is a case that requires you to go to the Imperial Clan Temple. However, your gatekeeper refused to cooperate, so I can only take forceful measures." The gatekeeper of the Gao mansion hid in a corner, trembling and not daring to raise his head. Gao Hong held back his anger and asked, "What case?" Zhang Chun said, "You'll know when you get there." Gao Hong said coldly, "No matter what, I'm still the royal uncle. You don't have the right to summon me. If you want to summon me, show me the official seal of the Imperial Clan Temple." Zhang Chun looked at a minor official of the Imperial Clan Temple and asked, "Is there such a thing?" The minor official nodded and said, "Lord Gao's sister is the son of the former emperor's concubine, concubine Gao of the Western Palace. To summon a member of the royal family or a relative of the emperor, you need the seal of the Imperial Clan Temple Master. Indeed, Lord Gao does not have this authority." Zhang Chun looked at Gao Hong and said, "You want the abbot's seal, right? Wait a moment. I'll be right back." Gao Hong's face darkened as he watched Zhang Chun leave with his men. Since Zhang Chun dared to come knocking on his door, he must have gotten hold of something that could be used against him. He couldn't figure it out at the moment. As he walked out of the main gate of the Gao mansion, Zhang Chun looked back and said, "Before I return, you are not allowed to go anywhere. If you leave the Gao mansion by 10 feet, you will be considered a fugitive. The Imperial Clan Court can arrest you or execute you." Gao Hong's face darkened, but he still retracted his foot. He walked back to the Gao mansion and said to a servant, "Go to the royal prince's mansion of Nanyang and inform the royal prince of this." On the way back to the Zongjing temple, Zhang Chun muttered, "The Gao manor doesn't look small. There should be 5 entrances, right?" A minor official beside him said, "The Gao residence is a standard 7-section mansion." 7. Zhang Chun thought about how his mansion only had 4 entrances, and there were only 2 maids and 2 servants. Just now in the Gao residence, there were almost 20 maids and servants who rushed out in an instant. Zhang Chun's heart was filled with envy. At this moment, the minor official continued, "That's nothing. The royal prince of Nanyang's mansion is the bigger one. It has 10 entrances and 10 entrances. He has 13 wives and concubines, and each of them has their own independent courtyard. Each of them has a senior maid and 4 junior maids. There are artificial mountains, ponds, and beautiful pavilions in the mansion." Zhang Chun thought about his dream of living in a 5-section mansion before he retired. He shook his head and said, "The layout is too small." The group walked through the palace gates and returned to the Zongjing temple. They didn't know that the imperial court was in an uproar. The number of officials in the imperial court was mysteriously reduced by more than 20. The morning court could no longer be held. Some officials even guessed that the powerhouses of the demon sect had sneaked into the fairy's capital and killed these officials to create chaos in the imperial court. After that, Mr. May clarified that the demon sect had nothing to do with this. Last night, It was the Zongjing Temple's deputy minister, Zhang Chun, who led the Zongjing Temple's people to arrest the guilty officials. He told the officials not to worry. It would have been better if Mr. May didn't clarify. After he did, the officials became even more worried. What? These officials were all arrested? More than 20 people were all arrested and sent to the Zongjing Temple. What's going on? Are we in trouble too? 20 officials of the imperial court had been arrested in one night. Without knowing the reason, all the officials in the Great Hall felt threatened, especially those who were close to these two. They were even more frightened. At some point, an official seemed to realize something. He mumbled, these people are all accomplices in Li Yi's case." His words woke everyone up. The officials counted the people who were absent today, and were shocked to find that all of them were related to Li Yi's case. A few days ago, when Li Mu overturned Li Yi's case, they were accomplices. However, they didn't receive any heavy punishment. They were only fined a few months to a year's salary. Everyone thought that it was the end. They didn't expect that it was just the beginning. Without any warning, those officials were all caught in one fell swoop overnight. Zhang Chun, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, who was also the Zongjing Temple's deputy minister, did it himself. There was no need to guess who was behind this. Zhang Chun was Li Mu's #1 henchman. He always fought for Li Mu in the imperial court. He must have been allowed to do this by Li Mu. Obviously, Li Mu didn't just want to overturn Li Yi's case. He also wanted to avenge Li Yi. As for the reason, everyone knew very well. Everyone in Fairy's capital knew that Li Yi's daughter was one of Li Mu's lovers. Not only did she live in his house, but they often walked hand in hand when they went out. They were very close. Li Mu overturned Li Yi's case because Li Yi was wronged and died. He wanted to avenge Li Yi because Li Yi was his father-in-law. Everyone's gaze shifted to where Li Mu was, only to find that there was no one there. Li Mu didn't even come to the imperial court today. Nonsense, this is simply nonsense. The left servant walked out and said in a deep voice, "What is the imperial court trying to do by arresting more than 20 officials for no reason?" Many people looked at Prince Shou in front. Prince Shou shook his head and said, "Don't look at me. I don't know anything." Some people in the imperial court shook their heads and sighed. Prince Shou was a prince and the head of the imperial court. He couldn't even control a minister. He was useless, Mr. May said. Yesterday, before Zhang Chun brought people to arrest them, he said that the imperial court has enough evidence. The left servant said with a dark face, "What evidence does he have to arrest more than 20 officials?" Mr. May said faintly, "The inner guards don't interfere with the imperial court. If you want to know, you just have to summon Zhang Chun to the imperial court." He turned to look at Sheng Guanli. Sheng Guanli walked to the curtain, and came out after a while. She said, "Summon Zhang Chun." Crepe Myrtle Palace was only a few hundred steps away from the imperial court. He quickly walked into the imperial court in half a cup of tea's time. Mr. May looked at the left servant and said, "If you have any questions, you can ask Lord Zhang directly." The left servant looked at Zhang Chun and asked coldly, "Assistant Minister Zhang, you arrested more than 20 officials in the middle of the night and caused chaos in the imperial court. Shouldn't you give His Majesty and the imperial court an explanation?" Zhang Chun said, "The imperial court has evidence to arrest people. May I ask what explanation you want?" The left servant said in a low voice, "What crime did the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Ai Tong, commit that you want to arrest him?" Zhang Chun said, "The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Ai Tong, took advantage of his position to embezzle taxes from the imperial treasury. What's wrong with me arresting him?" The left servant was shocked. He asked, "Do you have evidence?" Zhang Chun said, "The evidence is conclusive." The left servant said, "Minister of Imperial Treasury, Wu Sheng." Zhang Chun said, "Minister of Imperial Treasury, Wu Sheng, used his power to threaten and sleep with young girls. The youngest of those girls was only 8 years old. Shouldn't he be arrested?" The left servant moved his lips and said, "Then the Minister of Imperial Treasury, Chen Guang." Zhang Chun continued, "The Minister of Imperial Treasury, Chen Guang, allowed his younger brother to commit crimes and invade private residences. He bribed the Ministry of Justice to get his younger brother released and exonerated, breaking the law. What's wrong with me arresting him? He looked at the left servant and said loudly, "There's also Wei Chong from the Taichung Temple, Wang Ning from the Taichung Temple, and Zhuo Xian from the Ceremonies Department." As officials of the Great Zhou, these people acted as a protective umbrella for criminals who trafficked women and children. Shouldn't they be arrested? He listed the crimes of these more than 20 people one by one. The officials in the court were shocked. They had never heard of such things before. Since Zhang Chun dared to arrest them, then the Imperial Clan Temple might really have evidence of the crimes of so many officials. But how did they find out about these hidden things? Among the officials, some of them realized something. They lowered their heads and squeezed out 2 words from between their teeth. Zhouzhong. Chapter 380. In the Imperial Kitchen. Ever since Lu Hanyan and Li Qing opened their hearts to each other, Li Mu didn't want to go home. He didn't want to leave home. Of course, because of this, he came to the palace less often, and he hadn't been to the Imperial Kitchen for a long time. When it was only Lu Hanyan and the Empress, Li Mu could still take care of them. But when Lu Hanyan came to Chengdu and Li Qing moved in, the number of people who needed to be with him increased from 1 to 3. Li Mu was a little busy. This made him realize that he still had a lot of shortcomings in terms of time management. Mr. Lu Sun once said that time was like water in a sponge. If he could make use of the time he spent standing in a daze in the morning court, he could at least cook a bowl of piping hot noodles for the Empress after the morning court. Mr. May once mentioned by accident that the Empress liked to sleep in, so she often didn't eat breakfast in the morning. After the court, it was still early before breakfast time, so she might as well eat something to fill her stomach. Li Mu knew why the Empress liked to sleep in. It was because she couldn't fall asleep at night, so she would cook conch porridge with Li Mu in the middle of the night, or enter his dreams to teach him how to cultivate. As a cultivator in the upper 3 realms, she wouldn't feel tired even if she didn't sleep for a month. But cultivators were still people, and nothing could replace the joy and happiness brought by sleeping. Of course, that was in the past. At that time, Li Mu and she were both single. Now Li Mu had his wife in his arms every night. Unlike the Empress, who had nothing to do during the long nights, he couldn't sleep beside Lu Hanyan and talk to another woman all night, even if that woman was Lu Hanyan's idol. While he was cooking the noodles, several imperial chefs were watching. Finally, one of them couldn't help but ask, "Lord Li, is there some secret to your cooking? Why can't we use the same ingredients and the same steps to make your dish taste the same?" Regarding this point, Li Mu also did not know. With the same ingredients and steps, the food made by these imperial chefs would definitely be better than his. Perhaps the Empress was used to eating the food and liked his taste. After cooking the noodles, Li Mu calculated the time and arrived at Changel Palace just as the morning court session was about to end. Soon, a figure walked out from the back of the hall. Zhou looked at Li Mu and said, "Is it because I spoil you too much that you are becoming more and more unruly? You even dare to sneak out of the morning court. And what's that smell?" Her throat moved, and her tone instantly softened as she asked, "Did you cook noodles?" Li Mu said, "I guess that your Majesty probably didn't eat breakfast today, so I went to the Imperial Kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles." Zhou slowly sat down, thought for a moment, and said, "You are the Deputy Commander of the Bamboo Guards and also responsible for internal affairs. If there is an emergency in the morning court session, you can leave first. I won't blame you. Okay, give me the chopsticks." Watching the Empress eat the noodles in small bites, Li Mu asked, "Your Majesty, how is the situation in the court?" Zhou slowly finished a mouthful of noodles, and then said, "You don't know what the result of the trouble you caused will be. The court officials are all in danger, and the court is in chaos. The trouble was caused by you, so you are responsible for pacifying it." Li Mu said, "These more than 20 guilty officials deserve to be punished. Although it will cause chaos for a short period of time, as long as it's properly arranged, it won't affect the court too much. Your Majesty, you can quickly promote some experienced officials without any background to replace their original positions in the departments of those guilty officials. This way, the impact can be minimized and the normal operation of the Yamen can be maintained. At the same time, Your Majesty can also publicize the crimes of these officials, and use this to win over the people. After Lord Li overturned the case, the people of the 36 counties will greatly increase. After punishing these corrupt officials, Your Majesty's reputation will reach the peak, and you will not be inferior to the previous wise emperors of Great Zhou. It will only be a matter of time before you surpass Emperor 1. Zhou Qiong didn't seem to be interested in Li Mu's pancake at all. Her mind was completely focused on the bowl of noodles in front of her. She was puzzled. The same noodles and the same side dishes. Why was it that the imperial chef's dish didn't taste as good as Li Mu's? She waved her hand and said, "Just do as you said. Go and arrange it." Walking out of Changel Palace, Li Mu's heart was slightly heavy. He was a little worried. If the Empress favored him so much and let him make all the decisions, the court officials might be jealous and label him as a favored official who caused chaos. They might band together and get rid of him. No, he had to go back and fix the law bell as soon as possible. If the worst happened, the safety of his family would be guaranteed. When the time came, as long as the law bell covered the Li residence, there would be time to slowly shake people off. Li Mu returned to the secretariat. Lu Yi was about to leave the assistant minister's office, but when she looked up and saw him, she subconsciously retracted her foot. At the same time, in the Zongjing temple not far from the secretariat, Zhang Chun looked at Prince Shou and said, "Prince, without your seal, it won't be easy for me to catch people." Prince Shou shook his head and said, "If I give you my seal and let you catch our people, wouldn't I be in a difficult position?" Zhang Chun said, "According to the law, Gao Hong should be arrested." Prince Shou shook his head and said, "Whoever wants to arrest him can do it. In any case, I'm not arresting him." Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, "Then you are bending the law for personal gain. The next time I go to the imperial court, I will report you in the Golden Palace. As an official of the Zongjing Temple, you are bending the law for personal gain and shielding your accomplices. Your crime is not light." Prince Shou said angrily, "Are you threatening me?" Zhang Chun said indifferently, "This is persuasion." Prince Shou suddenly sighed and said, "You are threatening me with impeachment. If I arrest Gao Hong, they can't blame me. Show me the official document and my seal." Not long after, Zhang Chun brought people out of the Zongjing Temple and came to the southern courtyard, in front of the Gao residence. The morning court had already ended, and Gao Hong had already received news that Zhang Chun was not targeting him. Last night, more than 20 officials in the imperial court were arrested by the Zongjing Temple. Without exception, these 20 people were all officials of the old party. Gao Hong found it hard to believe that the Zongjing Temple had something on all of them. Even the Empress's internal guards did not have this ability. There was no doubt that there was a traitor among them. As for who the traitor was, it couldn't be any more obvious. Gao Hong gritted his teeth and said, "Zhou Zhong, you should be hacked into pieces." As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong had gained their trust over the years. The Ministry of Justice had also become a shelter for the old party officials. No matter what crimes they committed, they could be cleared of any crimes through the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong had helped the old party officials time and time again, and his status in the old party had also risen. At the same time, Zhou Zhong also had many things on them. Facts had proven that the more they valued someone, the deeper they were hurt. In just a month, Zhou Zhong had betrayed them twice. Previously, when he turned himself in and overturned Li Yi's case, he had already caused the old party to lose an arm. This time, although the officials he targeted were not high-ranking, the scope was huge. The old party would probably suffer another blow. However, this was not necessarily a bad thing. After this, the higher-ups would probably not tolerate Li Mu anymore. Even if it went against the emperor's will, they would resolutely get rid of him. Before that, he just needed to wait for news. Gao Hong did not receive any news, but Zhang Chun did. Looking at the official seal of the Imperial Clan Temple, Gao Hong said in disbelief, "You stole His Highness's seal." "Bullshit." Zhang Chun glared at him and said, "Do I need to steal it? I just need to tell him that you, Gao Hong, are guilty." If he didn't seal it, he would be bending the law for favoritism and covering up for his accomplice. "I will have the imperial court impeach him. and he will confess everything. Gao Hong's lungs were about to explode. He gritted his teeth and said, "Coward." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "If you want to scold him, go to the Imperial Clan Temple and scold him in front of him. Lord Gao, do you want to leave by yourself, or do we have to escort you?" Gao Hong snorted and said, "I'll leave by myself." He looked coldly at Zhang Chun and said, "Just you wait. Li Mu won't be able to jump around for long. When the time comes, the first one to die will be you." Zhang Chun glanced at him and said, "You might not be able to wait until that day." After having two people send Gao Hong to the Imperial Clan Temple, Zhang Chun waved his hand and said to the others, "Go to the next house." A moment later, at the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang, the people of the Imperial Clan Temple knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. A low-ranking official helplessly retreated and said, "Lord, there's no one." Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Put on the explosive talisman." The two low-ranking officials stuck a few pieces of fulu on the door of the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Zhang Chun used his magic power to control the fulu from a distance, and a powerful wave of spiritual energy erupted from the pieces of paper. However, as soon as the wave of spiritual energy was produced, a wave of water appeared on the door of the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Wherever the wave of water passed, the waves of spiritual energy produced by the fulu were easily wiped out. A low-ranking official said, "The protective formation." He walked to Zhang Chun and said, "Lord, the protective formation here is too strong. We can't break it." Zhang Chun asked, "How did the Imperial Clan Temple solve this kind of problem in the past?" The low-ranking official said, "We would send an official document to the Ministry of Personnel and ask them to send a high priest from the High Priest Department." Zhang Chun thought for a while and said, "Let's go back to the Imperial Clan Temple first. I'll write an official document for you to send to the Ministry of Personnel." The low-ranking official looked at him and reminded, "Lord, you're the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel." Zhang Chun slapped his head and said, "How could I forget about this? Come, follow me to the Ministry of Personnel." Soon, there was no movement outside the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Outside the door, the Commandery Prince of Nanyang waved his sleeves and snorted, "You're courting death." Without this incident, perhaps the higher-ups would continue to tolerate Li Mu. After this incident, getting rid of Li Mu was a top priority. At the same time, in a deep house in the southern court, there was a sound of gnashing teeth. Li Mu can't be kept alive anymore. This person's threat is even greater than Li Yi's back then. We must get rid of Li Mu, but His Majesty. With His Majesty's protection, it's impossible to get rid of him through the Imperial Court. If we want to get rid of Li Mu, we must restrain His Majesty and use special means. I'll go to the 100 Rivers Academy and meet the Dean. I'll go to the Myriad Scrolls Academy. Chapter 381. The four major academies had always held a special position in the Great Zhou. Although they did not directly participate in the politics of the imperial court, the academy presidents could restrict the emperor in the name of righteousness. Back when the former emperor was still on the throne, it was because of his arbitrary actions that the Great Zhou was plagued with internal and external troubles. The atmosphere was foul, and the faith of the people fell to the lowest point in the past century. At that time, the four major academies worked together. Four seventh realm powerhouses suppressed the imperial court in an unparalleled manner, and completely took away the former emperor's authority. Now the empress's special favor for Li Mu had repeatedly caused unrest in the imperial court. The four major academies had enough reasons to restrict the empress and stabilize the imperial court. If Li Mu had obediently been her favored official, it would have been fine. The old party would not take the risk of offending the empress and attack him just because she doted on him. However, his existence had already greatly damaged their vitality and strength. If this continued, even if the old party did not perish at the hands of the Zhou clan, they would perish at the hands of Li Mu. Li Mu must be eliminated. For this, they did not hesitate to force the emperor to abdicate. 100 Rivers Academy. A middle-aged man in luxurious clothes looked at Vice Academy President Chen and said, "I want to see the Academy President." Vice Academy President Chen asked. The Academy President is currently in seclusion. What is the matter, Your Highness King Ping? King Ping said solemnly. This is a matter of great importance. The Academy President must come out of seclusion. Vice Academy President Chen said. What exactly is the matter? Can you tell me first? King Ping said in a deep voice. The favored official Li Mu has bewitched the emperor and caused chaos in the imperial court. His Majesty has been bewitched by him and indulged him in every possible way, allowing him to wreak havoc in the imperial court. If this continues, the consequences will be unimaginable. I would like to ask the Academy Presidents to persuade His Majesty to punish the demonic official Li Mu and return peace to the imperial court. Vice Academy President Chen glanced at him and shook his head. However, what the Academy sees is not so. Li Mu is called Qingtian by the people of Fairy's capital, and is extremely loved by the people. Outside, he single-handedly dealt a heavy blow to the 10 demonic sections. Internally, he overturned the case of the favored official who was wrongly killed more than 10 years ago, and punished the lawless officials in the imperial court. Because of what he has done, the people's faith in the Great Zhou has reached its peak in 50 years, far surpassing the time of the emperor. It is inevitable that His Majesty's favor. Although he is a favored official, Your Highness. King Ping opened his mouth and said, There is one thing that I hope Your Highness can understand. Vice Academy President Chen looked at King Ping and said slowly, The Academy is the Academy of the Great Zhou, not the Academy of the Shao clan. If the Emperor is muddle-headed, the Academy should work together to support him. This is our duty. If the Emperor is wise, the Academy should do its best to assist him. This is also our duty. Whether His Majesty is wise or muddle-headed, it is not up to you to decide. It is up to the people to decide, King Ping said. But the Imperial Court, Vice Academy President Chen said. Without destruction, there can be no construction. A piece of good wood will not go bad just because a few worms have crawled on it. However, if they are allowed to gnaw on it, the good wood will eventually turn rotten one day. This is all I have to say. Take care of yourselves. With that, he put his hands behind his back and slowly left. King Ping stood where he was, and his expression changed for a while. Finally, he revealed a helpless expression. After a while, he left the 100 Rivers Academy and returned to King Ping's residence. Several people who were waiting in the residence immediately came up to him and spoke. How was it? What did the dean say? Brother Wang, say something. King Ping looked at everyone and sighed. Let's drop this matter. Don't mention it again. Why? Could it be that the Academy doesn't agree? While everyone was asking, another figure walked in from outside. The Duke of Jiangyin had just walked into the courtyard when he shook his head and said, I didn't see the dean. I don't think we can count on the Thousand Scrolls Academy. Among the 4 great academies, the White Deer Academy belonged to the Ministry of War, and could never be counted on. As for the other 3 great academies, the 100 Rivers Academy and the Thousand Scrolls Academy supported the Shao clan. The Azure Cloud Academy stood on the side of the Zhou clan. If even the 100 Rivers Academy and the Thousand Scrolls Academy could not be won over, then there was no need to mention the Azure Cloud Academy. At least 3 deans were needed to persuade the Empress. Even if they managed to win over the Azure Cloud Academy, it would be useless. One of them looked at the Duke of Jiangyin and asked, What did the Thousand Scrolls Academy say? The Duke of Jiangyin shook his head and said, They said that the Academy is not a tool for us to fight for power. They only want to ensure the continuation of the Shao clan's royal family. If the Empress wants to pass the throne to a disciple of the Zhou clan, they will do their best to stop it. Apart from that, the Academy will not participate in any court battles. After saying that, he looked at King Ping and asked, What did the 100 Rivers Academy say? King Ping said, They told us to take care of ourselves. No one spoke again. The courtyard fell into a long silence. The meaning of take care of ourselves was that the 100 Rivers Academy would not help them this time. All along, they had thought that the Zhou clan only had one advantage over the Shao clan, and that was that the Empress's surname was Zhou. Regardless of whether it was the control of the imperial court, the local area, or the number of academies behind them, they were stronger than the Zhou clan's new faction. In fact, if it was not for the former emperor's incompetence that caused the wrath of the people, and made the Azure Cloud Academy's dean extremely disappointed in the Xiao clan, there might be 3 or even 4 academies behind the Xiao clan. It was only now that they realized that although the 2 academies behind them were inclined to let the Xiao clan return to the orthodox lineage in the future, that was a matter for the future. At present, they still acknowledged the empress. In fact, it was not just the academies. Even everyone present was convinced by the current empress. She had shown great talent in cultivation since she was young. Otherwise, she would not have been valued by the former emperor and become the crown princess and empress. The fact that she could be acknowledged by the emperor's qi and successfully advanced to the 7th realm proved this point. At that time, no one in the Xiao clan could withstand the emperor's qi and forcefully break through. The royal clan would not have an additional 7th realm powerhouse, but a useless person whose foundation was destroyed. One had to know that she was only 25 years old back then. Since ancient times, no one in the Xiao clan had been able to inherit the emperor's qi and advance to the 7th realm at the age of 25. Obviously, the academies would not stand against the empress for this matter. The Duke of Jiangyin asked, "What do we do now?" After a long silence, King Ping shook his head and said tiredly, "Let's leave it at that." Although he did not say much, everyone could hear the intention to retreat from his words. The Xiao royal clan did not retreat when facing the new faction that was at the peak of their power. Now that they were facing a lone official, they had the intention to retreat. After failing to defeat Li Mu after using countless methods openly and secretly, they chose to avoid him. The Li residence. Li Mu had just learned from Zhang Chun that the Duke of Nanyang's residence was covered by a powerful formation, and the officials of the ancestral temple could not enter. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he mobilized the consecrated department to help, but was rejected by the consecrated department. The consecrated department was a special department in the imperial court. It was not an official office. The consecrators in it were powerhouses recruited from all over the country at great cost by the imperial court. Their relationship with the imperial court was a cooperative relationship, not a subordinate one. The consecrated department existed in the previous dynasty and had always been under the control of the old faction. Ever since someone tried to assassinate Zhou Zhong in the consecrated department, Li Mu decided to find an opportunity to reorganize the department. However, he had been busy with other things these days and delayed this matter. Now he was almost done with the matters at hand and could start to clean up the consecrated department. Before that, he had to help Zhang Chun solve the current problem. There were not many powerhouses in the ancestral temple. They could not be compared to the consecrated department, and could not break the formation of the Duke of Nanyang's residence. Li Mu walked out of the residence and said, "Let's go. I'll go with you to take a look." The Duke of Nanyang's residence. The Duke of Nanyang observed the situation outside the door through a mirror. Several officials of the ancestral temple stood there, but Zhang Chun had disappeared. This time, Li Mu suddenly went crazy and let Zhang Chun capture so many officials of the old faction. This really surprised the Duke of Nanyang. After the surprise, he was delighted. The reason why the higher-ups tolerated Li Mu was that although Li Mu had damaged the interests of the old faction, it was not to the extent that they would completely fall out with the Empress and get rid of Li Mu at all costs. Now it was time, because Li Mu's actions had shaken the foundation of the old faction in the imperial court. The entire old faction did not hesitate to ask the academy for help and restrain the Empress in order to get rid of Li Mu, a thorn in their flesh. In the end, Li Mu was killed by his arrogance. What the Duke of Nanyang had to do was wait. He was waiting for the higher-ups to make a move. When Li Mu died, Zhang Chun and the others would be like chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. While the Duke of Nanyang was waiting, he saw the figures of Zhang Chun and Li Mu appear in the mirror. When he saw Li Mu, a trace of impatience appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Why haven't you made a move yet?" Then he saw Li Mu and Zhang Chun outside, trying all kinds of methods to break the array of the Duke of Nanyang's residence. The Duke of Nanyang sneered. This array was set up by the array masters of the Spirit Array sect. Even a 6th realm expert would have to spend some effort to break it. Li Mu and Zhang Chun were overestimating themselves. Outside the Duke of Nanyang's residence, Li Mu also discovered the extraordinariness of this array. This array could absorb attacks from the outside world, and even turn the attacks or the spirit qi in the Fulu into one's own. It was not an ordinary defensive array. It might have been set up by an array master. Although Li Mu had the memories of the Thousand Illusions' venerable master, he knew that most of those arrays were evil arrays. He did not have a deep understanding of the orthodox arrays. This almost eliminated the possibility of him using ingenuity to break this array. Since he could not use ingenuity, he could only use brute force. Li Mu whistled, and the Dao bell flew out of his ear. In the blink of an eye, it grew to the height of a human. Li Mu pointed at the array outside the Duke of Nanyang's residence and said, "Crash into it." Buzz, the Dao bell responded with a buzz. Then it flew high into the air and swooped down, crashing heavily into the defensive array. A burst of light flowed on the array. It resisted stubbornly for a few breaths before the light on it quickly dimmed. Zhang Chun strode forward and slammed the door a few times. He shouted, "Xiao Yun, Duke of Nanyang, the Imperial Clan Temple is handling a case. Hurry up and open the door. Don't hide inside. I know you're at home. Hurry up and open the door." Chapter 382. Zhang Chun pounded on the door like he was announcing a funeral, but no one responded. He channeled his mana into his palms and slammed them down. The two doors collapsed inwards, and Xiao Yun, the Duke of Nanyang, appeared in front of him with a gloomy face. Zhang Chun stared at the Duke of Nanyang unhappily and asked, "The Imperial Ancestral Temple has summoned you to close your residence. Are you resisting arrest?" The Duke of Nanyang, the former Minister of Personnel, had fallen to the point where his residence was broken down and humiliated. The Duke of Nanyang could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He wanted nothing more than to kill Li Mu and Zhang Chun. Thinking that the two of them would not last long, he forcefully used his mana to suppress his anger. He looked at Zhang Chun and said coldly, "Why would the Imperial Ancestral Temple come to my residence for no reason? I thought it was a bold bandit who attacked my residence." Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Whether it is for no reason or not, you will know once you follow me to the Imperial Ancestral Temple." The Duke of Nanyang said, "Do you have the official document from the Imperial Ancestral Temple?" Zhang Chun took out the official document with the seal of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and waved it in front of him. He asked, "Is this enough?" The Duke of Nanyang said calmly, "If that is the case, let's go." Even as a duke, he could not openly resist the Imperial Ancestral Temple, because it was equivalent to resisting the Imperial Court. However, this did not mean that he would submit to Zhang Chun and Li Mu. King Ping and the others had already gone to the academy to discuss with the dean. Eliminating Li Mu was already the top priority of the Xiao clan. Perhaps at this moment, Bai Chuan and the two deans of the Myriad Scroll Academy had already taken action to restrain the Empress. The experts that King Ping and the others had arranged to clean up the Empress and kill Li Mu were already on their way here. Bai Chuan Academy. In the northeast corner of the academy, there was a bamboo forest that was green all year round. The students of Bai Chuan Academy would not easily approach this place. Everyone knew that this was the place where the dean cultivated. The dean of the academy was one of the few experts in the Great Zhou. He was deeply respected and loved by the students, and no one would disturb his cultivation place. In the depths of the bamboo forest, in front of a bamboo house, a hearty laughter could be heard. Beside the stone table in front of the bamboo hut, the man in white put down a word and said with a smile, "Zhao Qingsong, I haven't seen you in 2 years. Your chess skills are getting worse." The middle-aged man opposite him waved his hand, and the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard quickly flew up and returned to their respective baskets. He looked at the man in white and said, "What is there to show off?" "I was just careless and distracted. Otherwise, you would have lost 15 minutes ago." The man in white asked, "What can distract you?" The middle-aged man said, "I don't know if this change in the imperial court is good or bad." The man in white thought for a moment and said, "You mean that young man named Li Mu?" The middle-aged man said, "Who else could it be?" The man in white nodded and said, "Indeed. At such a young age, he has such a natural disposition. He has gathered the faith of the people in Shindu, can communicate with the heavens and earth, and can achieve the Tao with his words. He is also extremely talented in the Fulu Tao, and made the Fulu school bet its future on him. He can be said to be a hero of his generation. What kind of people are the Shao clan that you support? Why do they have to go against him instead of keeping the Zhou clan in check? The middle-aged man looked at him and said, The Zhou clan that you support is not much better than the Shao clan. The man in white crossed his arms and said calmly, I just can't stand Xiao Jing's actions. If Emperor Qing knew that the crown prince he chose was even more muddle-headed than him, and almost caused the great Zhou to be doomed eternally, he might as well smear that essence on the wall. The middle-aged man coughed softly and said, Zheng Xingchui, you are the head of a school after all. You should at least show some respect to the late emperor and Emperor Cheng. The man in white waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about those disappointing things. Li Mu is favored not only because he is handsome. His method of stabilizing the hearts of the people is really useful. In less than a year, the faith of the people in the various counties has surpassed the peak of the reign of Emperor Cheng and the late emperor. If this can continue, in the next 10 years, the glory of the reign of emperor would may be reproduced. The middle-aged man seemed to think of something and murmured, Could it be that he is also one of the descendants of the extinct 100 schools? There seem to be many among the 100 schools who cultivate with the faith of the people. He has always been trying to reform the law. Could it be the school of legalism? Establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge of the past saints, establishing peace for all ages. The man in white whispered a few words and said, It sounds more like the Confucian school. He has the ambition of ruling the world, and is full of righteousness. It is very likely that he is a descendant of the Confucian school. The middle-aged man put down a chess piece and rubbed his chin. He said, The Confucian school has always been active in the court and respected etiquette. However, his actions are bold and radical, seeking change. It is not like the Confucian school, but more like the school of legalism. The man in white put down another chess piece and said, Whether it is the Confucian school or the school of legalism, those who can rule the country are righteous. Let him be. The Zongjing Temple. The prison of the Zongjing Temple, which had always been cold and cheerless, was especially lively today. More than 20 court officials were locked together, all frowning. Most of them had been brought from their homes by the people of the Zongjing Temple last night. Some of the officials had their doors blown up by Zhang Chun while they were eating dinner. Some of them had been pulled out of their beds while they were being intimate with their concubines. At first, everyone was panic-stricken, but after arriving at the Zongjing Temple and seeing so many familiar colleagues, they slowly calmed down. When they saw the former Assistant Minister of Personnel Gao Hong and the Duke of Nanyang being arrested, they were even more reassured. Of the two of them, one was a relative of the imperial family, and the other was a member of the imperial clan. The higher-ups would definitely not let them stay in the Zongjing Temple. When the time came, they would be able to save them along the way. After calming down, they began to curse the main culprit. This damned Zhou Zhong. I've really misjudged him all these years. He doesn't have many days left and he still wants to drag us down with him. Gao Hong did not curse like the others. He knew very well that Zhou Zhong had been sitting in the position of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice all these years, and had a lot of information on them. He no longer had the golden ticket of exemption from death, and was no longer the Assistant Minister of Personnel. Once those crimes were confirmed, it was enough for him to die several times. In the cell next door, the Duke of Nanyang was meditating with his eyes closed. At a certain moment he opened his eyes and glanced at Gao Hong. He said indifferently, Why are you panicking? Gao Hong strode over and asked, Duke, are you sure that the higher-ups will make a move on Li Mu? The Duke of Nanyang said, Li Mu has already forced them into this situation. Do you think they will continue to tolerate it? Gao Hong said uneasily, But it's been so long. Why hasn't there been any movement at all? The Duke of Nanyang said indifferently, What's the hurry? Perhaps they are already on their way. Gao Hong was still worried. He walked out of the cell and said to a jailer, Go and invite His Highness Prince Shou here. Hearing this, The jailer quickly walked out of the prison. Although the prisoners in the cell were all criminals, they still had a higher status than the jailers. As a lowly jailer, he did not dare to disobey these people. After a while, Prince Shou walked in from the outside. He looked at the two of them and said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you caught again?" Gao Hong said. "Isn't it because Zhang Chun took the official document with your highness's seal?" Prince Shou frowned and said, "Why? Are you blaming me? Zhang Chun threatened me. If I didn't do it, I would be bending the law. He even said that he would impeach me in the Golden Palace. What can I do? All of you didn't clean up after what you did and now blame me. Are you still human?" Gao Hong quickly said, "That's not what I meant." Prince Shou said angrily, "Then what do you mean?" The Duke of Nanyang finally opened his mouth and said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. We want to ask your highness Prince Shou to go out of the palace and ask about the situation. Why haven't they made a move on Li Mu?" Prince Shou glanced at them and said, "Wait here. I'll go and ask." Half an hour later, in the southern court, Prince Ping's residence. Prince Shou sipped his tea and looked at Prince Ping. He asked, "What about the Duke of Nanyang, Gao Hong and the rest? Should I let them go?" Prince Ping stretched out his hand and said, "No." Prince Shou was stunned and asked, "Then what should I do?" Prince Ping took a deep breath and said, "According to the law, those who should be demoted will be demoted, and those who should be killed will be killed." Prince Shou spat out his tea and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He asked, "Then what about the Duke of Nanyang?" Prince Ping shook his head and said, "Without the death exemption token, he can't be saved." Prince Shou was stunned and said, "Aren't you going to join forces with the academy to make a move on Li Mu?" Prince Ping said, "Li Mu is not our enemy. The Zhou family is. There's no need to take the risk." Prince Shou said, "But that's not right. If Li Mu makes a move, Xiaoyun will die." Prince Ping leaned on the chair and slowly let out a sigh of relief. He said he asked for it. 36 dukes. Even if one is gone, there are still 35. Smack. Prince Shou stood up abruptly and pointed at Prince Ping. He said angrily, "How can you do this? Do you have any humanity left? Those are our beloved friends." Prince Ping also stood up and said coldly, "What do you know? We're looking at the big picture." Prince Shou stared at him for a long time and finally sat back down. He leaned weakly on the chair and said, "The blood flowing in his body is the same as ours," Prince Ping said. "It's because the blood flowing in his body is the blood of the Xiao family. When necessary, he should sacrifice himself for the Xiao family." Ancestral Temple. After 2 hours, Prince Shou reappeared in the heavenly prison. Gao Hong and the Duke of Nanyang were already anxious from waiting. The Duke of Nanyang was still able to maintain his calm, while Gao Hong grabbed the bars of the cell and looked in a certain direction. When he finally saw the chubby figure of Prince Shou, he asked anxiously without waiting for Prince Shou to come closer, "Your Highness, how is it?" Prince Shou patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it's fine." Gao Hong let out a long sigh of relief. Then excitement appeared on his face as he asked, "When will Li Mu die?" Prince Shou let out a sigh of relief and said, "When I save you." Gao Hong finally relaxed and sat down slowly. He leaned against the wall and said, "I can't wait any longer." Prince Shou was silent for a moment. Suddenly he looked at the two of them and said, "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat? I'll get someone to send it in." Chapter 383. The officials who were locked up in the Zongjing Temple lived a life of luxury at home. Naturally, they weren't used to the food of the Zongjing Temple. As the head of the Zongjing Temple, Prince Shou took this into consideration and sent them food from the restaurant outside the palace. In the prison, the officials were eating heartily. "This pork shoulder is from the Wafting Fragrance restaurant." "It's definitely from the Wafting Fragrance restaurant. The smell of the wine can't be wrong. The food of the Zongjing Temple is really hard to swallow. The Wafting Fragrance restaurant is the best. Thank you, Your Highness Prince Shou." Other than having their freedom restricted, the 20 officials didn't suffer much in the Zongjing Temple. Prince Shou arranged a single cell for each of them and changed the bedsheets. In order to protect their privacy, He even had people separate the cells with curtains. 3 meals a day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. 2 hours in advance, the prison guards would send the menus from the various restaurants in the divine capital. Each of them could order 4 dishes, 1 soup, and a pot of wine. If they were hungry in the middle of the night, they could even order supper. For this, Prince Shou specially invited the chefs of the wafting fragrance restaurant to the Zongjing Temple to be on standby. Even if these officials had more needs in the middle of the night, the chefs would have to crawl out of bed to satisfy them. In terms of food, the food these officials usually ate at home wasn't as good as the food in the Zongjing Temple. Not only that, Prince Shou even considered their physical needs, and used his sedan to secretly bring the girls from the brothels outside the palace into the Zongjing Temple to comfort these officials at night. This made the officials in the prison change their impression of Prince Shou. Other than his stupidity and cowardice, Prince Shou still had his shining points. Despite the risk of being impeached by the censor, he still took care of these criminal officials meticulously. This wasn't something that anyone could do. It was really good to have one of their own in the Zongjing Temple. In the courtyard of the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun watched as the prison guards sent the food made by the wafting fragrance restaurant chefs into the prison. He looked at Prince Shou and said slowly, "Your Highness, isn't this a little too much?" "Too much?" King Shou glanced at him and said, "How is this going overboard? When you took special care of Li Yi's daughter, did I say anything overboard? Why are you like this?" Zhang Chun was stunned. "I just covered her cell with a curtain and changed her bed." King Shou said, "I also covered up their cells and changed their beds." Zhang Chun looked at the busy figures in the kitchen of the Zongjing Temple and said, "But you brought the chef of the restaurant into the palace. Isn't that too much?" King Shou said, "Is this too much? This is not too much at all. Let me tell you what is too much. Li Mu used His Majesty's imperial kitchen to cook for other women. This is what is too much." Zhang Chun was stunned and said, "But you can't let them drink. The imperial ancestral temple strictly forbids prisoners from drinking." After that, he waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about the wine you gave to those guilty officials. You even found women for them. What do you think the Zongjing Temple is? A restaurant or a brothel?" King Shou glanced at him and said, "Ordinary prisoners have to eat a full meal before they are executed. Are you in charge of the Zongjing Temple, or am I?" Zhang Chun said angrily, "You?" Then he seemed to realize something and looked at King Shou in shock. King Shou sighed and shook his head. Zhang Chun silently shut his mouth. After thinking for a while, he said, "Even if you want to find women from the brothel, Your Highness' taste is too unique. You don't let them enjoy, but let them suffer. I know of a brothel in Luoyang. The women there are very beautiful." King Shou said indignantly, "What's wrong with my taste? They are fat and chubby. Aren't they good?" In the prison, 2 officials had just finished their sweet and sour fish. As they picked their teeth with the fish bones, they complained, "Everything about His Highness King Shou is good, but I really can't agree with him when it comes to women. I can't even bear to touch the women he finds." King Shou walked in and said, "If you're not satisfied, I'll give you a beautiful one tonight." The official smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." King Shou walked to the innermost cell and asked Commandery Prince Nanyang, "Are you used to it?" Commandery Prince Nanyang said, "Not really, but thank you for taking care of me." At first, Commandery Prince Nanyang looked down on King Shou. Although King Shou was one of the 7 one-word princes, and his status was much higher than his, everyone in Luoyang knew about King Shou's cowardice and incompetence. Now, although his evaluation of King Shou's cowardice and incompetence did not change, he did not hate him as much. King Shou squatted at the door of the cell and said, "Nanyang County is such a good place. Why did you come to Luoyang in the first place?" Commandery Prince Nanyang smiled and said, "Nanyang is good in every way except for one thing. It's not Luoyang." King Shou murmured, "Luoyang, what's so good about Luoyang?" Commandery Prince Nanyang said, "Power, wealth, women, cultivation resources. Luoyang has everything you want. It's thousands of times better than Nanyang County." King Shou sighed and said, "Although Luoyang is good, it's also dirty." Commandery Prince Nanyang did not hear what King Shou said clearly and asked, "Brother, when will you let us out?" King Shou said, "You know what you've done. If I let you go just like that, I won't be able to answer to the people and the imperial court. Instead, the new party will have something to use against you. Therefore, we still have to put on a show. Commandery Prince Nanyang asked. How do we put on a show? King Shou said slowly. You'll still be sentenced to death. Then, you'll be sent outside to be executed. Of course, this is all an act. The executioner's knife won't really cut you down. The dean will use his great power to create an illusion to make the people think that you're really dead. After that, you'll have to appear in Luoyang with a new identity. Commandery Prince Nanyang frowned and said, So troublesome? King Shou said helplessly. Do you think what you've done is a small matter? According to the crimes that Zhou Zhong has confessed, each and every one of you will be beheaded. This is the only way to save your lives. From today onwards, Commandery Prince Nanyang is dead. You'll have a new identity. At that time, we'll find a way to let you enter the imperial court again. After that, you'll get back everything you've lost. Commandery Prince Nanyang had a thoughtful expression as he carefully considered King Shou's words. Indeed, since Li Yi's case was overturned, Commandery Prince Xiao Yin was no different from a dead man in the Great Zhou. His official position was revoked, and he would never be employed by the imperial court again. Instead of using the useless identity of Commandery Prince Nanyang, he might as well change his appearance and start a new life. If King Shou really let him go so easily, Commandery Prince Nanyang would be suspicious. Li Mu and the Zhou clan were watching. If he let them go, King Shou wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. However, his plan was so meticulous that it wasn't possible for him to be deceived. It was most likely a decision made by the higher-ups. At this moment, King Shou continued, I need all of you to act out this scene. Don't mess it up. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted, and no one will be able to save you. Commandery Prince Nanyang no longer had any doubts. He nodded and said, I understand. King Shou patted him on the shoulder and said, Remember, even if a knife is placed on your neck, you must remain calm. This is because the executioners this time are all our people. Oh right, remember to tell the others. Otherwise, if they mess it up, everyone will be implicated and Li Mu won't be able to get rid of them. Commandery Prince Nanyang said, Don't worry. If anyone dares to mess it up, I'll take their life. In the court of the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun looked at the few guilty officials kneeling before him. He picked up a document and read it aloud. Minister Counselor Ai Tong of the Ministry of Revenue. During his reign, he coveted a huge amount of tax from the national treasury. According to the law of the Great Zhou, he is sentenced to death by beheading. Minister Wu Sheng of Guanglu Temple. According to the law of the Great Zhou, he is sentenced to death by beheading. Wei Chong, Wang Ning, and Zhuo Xian. As officials of the Great Zhou, they participated in the trafficking of women and children, and acted as a shield for evil forces. They are sentenced to death by beheading. Minister Chen Guang. They are sentenced to death by beheading. When Zhang Chun announced the sentence, there was no fear on the faces of the officials in the court. Some of them even looked at each other and laughed. It wasn't that they weren't afraid of death. It was just that King Shou had already made it clear to them that this was just an act. When the time came, not only would they not die, but they would also usher in a more glorious life with a new identity. The death penalty documents of these officials had already been reviewed multiple times. After Zhang Chun announced the sentence in the court, more than 20 people were escorted to the execution ground. King Shou stood outside the Zongjing Temple and nodded at all the guilty officials who walked out of the temple. After receiving the hint from King Shou, everyone felt more at ease. They rushed to the execution ground without any fear, looking quite resolute. On the execution ground, screens surrounded the execution ground. The people below the execution ground couldn't see the specific situation on the execution ground. This time, those who were to be executed were all officials of the imperial court. There were even relatives of the emperor. The scene of their execution couldn't be seen by the people. Li Mu held Li Qing's hand and stood in the crowd. The main culprits and accomplices who framed her father back then were almost all here. Li Mu promised her that all the culprits of the case back then would receive the punishment they deserved. Behind the screens, more than 20 people knelt there. There was still no fear on their faces. Some of them even looked back at the executioner with a smile. Even though the executioner was used to big scenes, he still felt goosebumps from the strange gazes of these people who were about to die. Zhang Chun sat at the executioner's seat. He looked up at the sky, grabbed a bunch of sticks and threw them out. He said, "The time is up. Start the execution." The executioner's knife was raised high and quickly brought down. Looking at the heads rolling next to him, one of the officials sighed in his heart. A seventh realm cultivator was indeed a seventh realm cultivator. This kind of realistic illusion almost fooled him, let alone the people. There were also a few people whose expressions changed when they noticed the blood of the people next to them splattering on them. However, the executioner behind them didn't give them time to think. With a slash of the knife, the heads were separated from the bodies and their souls scattered. Before and after the execution ground was completely silent. In the past, before the execution, the prisoners would cry and howl. This was probably the quietest execution that the people of the fairies' capital had ever seen. King Shou stood outside the execution ground and sighed deeply. He muttered, "In your next life, be a good person." Chapter 384. The execution was very strange. Even the people outside the execution ground could tell that something was wrong. They had seen executions in the past. It was normal for the prisoners to cry and scream before they died. There were also many who yelled and cursed. However, this time, there were no cries and no cursing. The execution platform surrounded by screens was silent. More than 20 people were calmly going to their deaths. It was so quiet that it was eerie. Soon, the cheers of the people drowned out the silence. Good execution. They are all criminals who wronged Lord Li back then. These people deserve to die. Lord Li can rest in peace now. At the front of the crowd, Li Qing held Li Mu's hand tightly and said, "Let's go." The two of them turned around. The people took the initiative to open a path for them. They walked slowly. The people behind them watched them leave. They clasped their fists and said, "I wish Lord Li and Miss Li a long and happy life together. Grow old together. May you have a child." More than 20 guilty officials were beheaded, and the people all clapped their hands in joy. These people were not only accomplices in framing Lord Li, but they themselves were also guilty of many crimes. Their death was a good thing for the country and the people. After the execution, some of the commoners even spat on the execution platform as they left, their faces filled with joy. King Shou sighed and said to a servant beside him, "Don't remove the screens yet. Inform their families to come and collect the bodies." The servant nodded and said, "Yes." King Shou put his hands behind his back and shook his head as he walked away. He said softly, "It's good that they're dead. There's no more trouble after they die." Zhang Chun walked behind him and said, "These people have committed countless crimes. It's too easy for them to die like this." Although these criminals were dead, they still thought that it was a trap. After today, they would reappear in the divine capital with a new identity. Although they died in the end, at least they didn't feel fear or pain before they died. King Shou said casually, "In life, there are some things that shouldn't be taken too seriously. It's fine if it's not too bad." The news that more than 20 officials from the old party, including Commandery Prince Nanyang and the elder brother of the concubine dowager, had been beheaded at the street corner quickly swept through Luoyang and shocked countless people. Are they really dead? No one saved them? The Shao clan hasn't done anything. Are they just going to be abandoned like that? What are they afraid of, and what are they afraid of? You still don't understand. They're obviously afraid of Li Mu. At the Zhou family's banquet, Zhou Chuan's face was pale. Chen Jian was dead, Gao Hong was dead, and the Duke of Nanyang, Xiaoyan, was dead. Of the 7 main culprits back then, only he, the Duke of Zhongyong, and the Duke of Peace and Peace were left. Li Mu didn't even spare the accomplices, so how could he spare the main culprits? In particular, the death of the Duke of Nanyang had made him even more terrified. Even the Shao royal family could not escape Li Mu's punishment, let alone him. Zhou Chen lowered his head to eat, but his forehead was full of cold sweat. He knew what his father was worried about. The Duke of Nanyang and those people were dead. Perhaps his father would be his next target. More than half a year ago, Li Mu was still a small official in a remote county. Unexpectedly, in just half a year, he had grown into an existence that even the old party did not dare to provoke. The Xiao royal family was not as fearful of the Zhou family as they were of Li Mu. Just before he came to Luoyang, Zhou Chen had tried to send an assassin to finish him off, but it had ended in failure. If Li Mu knew that he was the one who sent that assassin, wouldn't he be reduced to the same fate as those people this morning? In the Zhou family, while Zhou Chuan and his son were in shock, Li Mu was also hesitating in the Li residence. Until today, most of the people involved in the case back then had received the punishment they deserved. No accomplices had escaped, and there were still 4 main culprits in Luoyang. These 4 people were the Marquis of Zhongyong, the Earl of Ping and the Marquis of Yongding, and Zhou Chuan of the Zhou family. The first 3 bigwigs of Luoyang were involved in Zhou Zhong's scheme. They had no enmity with Li Yi. Zhou Zhong knew that he could not change the overall situation, so he deliberately lured them into the trap in order to get the 3 death exemption tokens in their hands. Before Zhou Zhong lured them in, Li Yi's fate was already sealed. These 3 people were just Zhou Zhong's pawns. Although they had bad records, there was no need to kill them. As for Zhou Chuan, although Li Mu wanted him to pay the price, there were 2 problems in front of him. First, the booklet that Zhou Zhong gave him contained evidence of the crimes of the old party officials. There was nothing about Zhou Chuan, so Li Mu could not overthrow him through the law. Second, Zhou Chuan was the Empress's uncle. Li Mu had already killed one of her younger brothers. He did not know how the Empress would feel if he killed another of her uncles. Even though she had left the Zhou family, the blood that flowed in her body was the same as the blood of the Zhou family. The Empress cared about him so much, so Li Mu could not ignore her feelings at all. He pondered for a long time and walked into the courtyard. He said to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, "I'm going to the palace. You don't have to wait for me to eat today." After informing them, Li Mu left the Li residence and went to the palace. He first went to the imperial kitchen and made a few dishes that the Empress liked. Then he took the food box and went to Changle Palace. In Changle Palace, Zhou looked at the unusually sumptuous meal on the table. Finally, he looked at Li Mu and said, "What's the matter? Speak." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Nothing." Zhou picked up his chopsticks and said, "I'll only give you one chance." Li Mu said, "Among the people who killed Lord Li Yi, the former Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, was also an important mastermind." Zhou was silent for a long time. Then he said lightly, "If you have evidence of his crimes, you can punish him according to the law. I will not protect him just because he is my uncle. If one day, the one who breaks the law is you, I will not protect you." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." He walked out of Changle Palace and sighed in relief. Zhou Chuan was different from the others. No matter what, Li Mu could not go around the Empress and make a move on him. So he needed to ask the Empress's opinion first. After getting the Empress's approval, there was only one problem left to solve. That was how to collect evidence of Zhou Chuan's crimes. The new party had only been established for 3 years. Moreover, the officials of the 2 parties were very different. The old party consisted mostly of influential officials, while the new party consisted mostly of new officials. In comparison, the influential officials had more misdeeds. Collecting evidence of the old party officials' crimes was easier than collecting evidence of the new party's crimes. Moreover, compared to the old party, the new party had stronger restrictions on the officials. This was also one of the reasons why Zhou Zhong had not been able to collect evidence of Zhou Chuan's crimes for so many years. Li Mu did not think that Zhou Zhong would be able to do something that Zhou Zhong had not been able to do for so many years. He walked out of the palace gates and stood outside for 15 minutes. Then he walked toward the northern courtyard. This time he did not go home. Instead, he stopped in front of another tall gate. Li Mu walked up and knocked on the door knocker. Soon, the gate opened a crack. A servant poked his head out and asked, "May I ask who your excellency is and why you have come to Zhou Mansion?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Mansion's gatekeeper and said indifferently, "Please go in and inform them that Censor Li Mu of the Secretariat has come to visit." A moment later, Zhou Chuan frowned and anxiously paced around the hall. He muttered, Li Mu, what is he doing here? I won't see him. Let him go back. Zhou Xiong stretched out his hand and said, No, if word gets out, outsiders will think that our Zhou family is afraid of Li Mu. Let him in. Zhou Chuan said, Second brother, but it's fine. Let's see what he wants first. Zhou Xiong waved his hand and said, His target might be you. Third brother, you should leave for now. After Zhou Chuan left, Zhou Ting said, I'll leave as well. His only son had died at the hands of Li Mu. He could not face Li Mu calmly. A moment later, under the guidance of a servant, Li Mu passed through 2 doors, walked through several corridors, and arrived at a hall. Zhou Xiong was the only one in the hall. Li Mu walked into the hall. Zhou Xiong said indifferently, Lord Li, please take a seat. There's no need for that. Li Mu shook his head and said, I'm here today to tell you one thing. Zhou Xiong picked up his teacup and asked, What is it? Li Mu said, Zhou Chuan of the Zhou family was one of the main culprits who framed my father-in-law. Zhou Xiong said in a deep voice, That case is over. Li Mu said, That's what Duke Nanyang and Gao Hong thought too. Duke Nanyang and Gao Hong had just been executed. This was a blatant threat. Zhou Xiong slammed his teacup on the table and said loudly, Li Mu, what are you trying to say? Li Mu said indifferently, Let Zhou Chuan ask to be exiled and this matter will end here. Zhou Xiong was stunned for a moment before he became furious. He stood up and gritted his teeth. You're dreaming. Li Mu shook his head and said, If it weren't for His Majesty, I would do it myself. At that time, it won't be as simple as being exiled. Don't force me. Zhou Xiong wanted to throw his teacup at Li Mu's face. He came to the Zhou family and asked the Zhou family to ask to be exiled. Who was the one forcing who? Zhou Xiong said angrily, What right do you have to say that? Li Mu looked at him and said, When I was in the northern county, I was assassinated. Don't think that I don't know that the mastermind behind the assassination was Zhou Chuan's son, Zhou Chun. Crash. Zhou Chun, who was eavesdropping in the back hall, was shocked when he heard Li Mu's words. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and knocked over a chair. He picked up the chair with a pale face and his body trembled slightly. In the front hall, Zhou Xiong said flatly, You're slandering me. Li Mu smiled and said, Whether it's slander or not, you'll know when you get to the Imperial Clan Temple. I still have a lot of evidence of your Zhou family's crimes. At that time, it won't just be Zhou Chen's case. Zhou Chuan, Zhou Ting, and the other officials of your new party won't be able to escape. The fate of those officials on the execution ground today will be your fate. Zhou Xiong's face turned red. He pointed at him and said angrily, You. Li Mu looked at Zhou Xiong and said calmly, Chen Jian's grave is already covered in grass. Gao Hong and Prince Nanyang's bodies have just turned cold. I only asked Zhou Chuan to be exiled, because of His Majesty. I have no interest in the fight between the old and new parties. However, if I don't punish Zhou Chuan and avenge my father-in-law, I won't be able to answer to my wife. Zhou Chuan's request to be exiled is my limit. I'll give you 3 days to think about it. Chapter 385. After saying those words, Li Mu turned and left the Zhou family. After he left, a few figures walked out from the back hall. Zhou Xiong looked coldly at Zhou Chun and asked, Is what Li Mu said true? Zhou Chun nodded and said fearfully, But back then when I hired the assassin, I did not reveal any of my identity. Zhou Xiong sat in his chair and said weakly, How much leverage does he have on the Zhou family? Most of the conflicts in the imperial court could not be seen in the open. These conflicts in the dark were filled with blood and filth, and could not be shown in front of others. With the Shao clan's existence, the Zhou family could not avoid such filthy matters. Once they were exposed and seriously investigated, there was no doubt that the fate of the old party officials would be the fate of some of the new party members. Zhou Chuan said, I'm guessing that Li Mu is lying to us. Even the old party does not have any evidence. How would Li Mu know? Zhou Xiong looked at him and asked, What if? He looked at Zhou Chuan and said, Even if he does not have more leverage, just the crime of assassination is enough to send your son to his death. Zhou Chen trembled and hugged Zhou Chuan's thigh. He said fearfully, Father, I don't want to die. I'm your son. You have to save me. Pa. Zhou Chuan slapped him away with a gloomy face and did not say a word. Li Mu's request for Zhou Qin and the other members of the new party to be spared was that Zhou Chuan himself had to request to be banished to the army. The place of banishment was either the demon nation or the ghost realm. Any sinner who went to such a place would have a slim chance of surviving. Some would even die 10 times out of 10. This unfilial son wanted him dead. At that moment, Zhou Chuan regretted giving birth to this son for the first time. At that moment, a figure slowly walked in from outside. Zhou Xiong stood up and said, "Big brother." Zhou Jing said, "I know." Zhou Xiong thought for a moment and asked, "Big brother, can you divine if Li Mu is bluffing? Does he really have leverage on us?" Zhou Jing shook his head and said, "He has a magic treasure that can shield him from the heavenly secrets. I can't calculate anything related to him. Even if I didn't have that item, I might not be able to calculate these things." Zhou Xiong sat back down and asked worriedly, "What should we do now?" If Li Mu had come to the Zhou family to spout nonsense without any basis, there was a 90% chance that he was bluffing. However, he had directly pointed out the secret things that Zhou Chen had done, which made Zhou Xiong feel uncertain. If what Li Mu said was true, then they would have to give up on Zhou Chuan and be banished to the army. If they don't do as Li Mu said, Zhou Chen will die. Not only that, there is a certain possibility that the other officials of the new party will also be implicated. If Li Mu really has something on them, within the scope of the law, Li Mu could do whatever he wanted. This was something that everyone in Luoyang was aware of. How arrogant was the Xiao royal family. They were even capable of doing things like forcing the emperor to abdicate the throne. However, in the end, they still had to watch the heads of over 20 officials from the old faction fall to the ground. Even the Duke of Nanyang could not be saved. Once Li Mu made public the evidence in his hands, the new party would probably follow in the footsteps of the old party. If Zhou Chuan did not leave, Zhou Chen would definitely die. Perhaps even more people would die. If Zhou Chuan asked to be banished, only 3 of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family would be left. This was a dilemma that only the head of the family, Zhou Jing, had the right to make. In the hall, everyone's gaze was on Zhou Jing. Zhou Chuan could not help but say, "Even if Li Mu really has something on us, can we trust what he says? What if he goes back on his words?" Zhou Jing looked at him and said, "No matter what decision you make, the Zhou family will agree." Zhou Chuan's voice gradually became softer as a bitter smile appeared on his face. If his eldest brother was not threatened by Li Mu, he would have clearly told him that the Zhou family would not be threatened and would not agree to Li Mu's request. Other than that, any decision he made would actually lead to another choice, sacrificing him in exchange for the stability of the Zhou family and the new party. It turned out that he had been abandoned like the commandery prince of Nanyang. Zhou Chuan took a deep breath and said, "Let's do as Li Mu says. For the Zhou family, for the new party, and for our great cause." Zhou Jing was silent for a moment before he said, "The family will prepare some things for you so that you can protect yourself. When the time is right, you can return to Luoyang." Zhou Chuan cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, "Thank you, eldest brother." The third of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family, the former Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, felt guilty for framing Li Yi. Although he had been pardoned by the death exemption medallion, he still asked to be sent to prison and left Luoyang. This became another eye-catching event after the execution of the commandery prince of Nanyang and the others. Back when they framed Li Yi, they were all sentenced to death. Later, they were all pardoned by the death exemption medallion. The common people thought that this would be the end. They did not expect that it was only the beginning. After the commandery prince of Nanyang, Xiao Yun, and old concubine Gao's elder brother, Gao Hong, were pardoned by the death exemption medallion, they were sent to the execution ground for other crimes. In the end, they could not escape death. Although Zhou Chuan did not die, the crime of being sent to prison was not much different from delaying the execution of the death penalty. It was just that he would die a little later. At this point, all the main culprits and accomplices in Li Yi's case had paid the price with their lives. The other 3 fish that escaped the net, the Marquis of Zhongyong, the Earl of Ping'an, and the Marquis of Yongding, disappeared from Luoyang overnight after hearing and witnessing these things. Someone saw them leave Luoyang with their family the night before the execution of the Commandery Prince of Nanyang. Li residence. After Li Mu heard these things, he heaved a long sigh of relief. He pulled Li Qing into his arms and whispered in her ear. "It's all over." Li Qing was silent. Not long after, a wet mark appeared on Li Mu's chest. After 14 years, the injustice of the Li residence was finally redressed. Those people who had inflicted suffering on them back, then had finally received their overdue judgment 14 years later. Li Qing could only completely let go of certain things that she had been carrying in her heart at this moment. Li Mu hugged her. After a while, when he lowered his head, he realized that Li Qing had fallen asleep in his arms. He carefully carried her back to her room and placed her on the bed. He kissed her forehead gently and left the room. Zhou Chuan had volunteered to be banished. Li Mu had no intention of continuing to fight the Zhou family to the death. Firstly, he did not have anything on the Zhou family. He could trick them once, but he might not be able to trick them a second time. Secondly, 2 of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family had already died at the hands of Li Mu. Zhou Chu had even died at his hands. If he continued to be aggressive, he might be driven into a corner. Most importantly, he had to consider the Empress. After all, that was the family that had raised her. Even if this family had betrayed her and made her watch helplessly as the Zhou family was destroyed at the hands of Li Mu, it was still a form of torture for her. He had used less than a year to go from a nameless minor official to a person that both the new and old parties feared. In less than a year, too many changes had happened in Luoyang. As Li Mu walked on the streets, he no longer saw numb faces. The people's backs were straight, their eyes were bright, and they smiled from the bottom of their hearts. All of this showed that the Luoyang of today was no longer the Luoyang of the past. An old woman with a walking stick was walking on the street. She accidentally fell. A young man and a young woman passed by quickly helped her up and helped her to the side of the road to rest. The old woman rested for a while, then leaned on her walking stick and slowly walked on the street. When she reached the corner of the street, she saw a beggar in ragged clothes. She thought for a moment, then took out a few copper coins from her sleeve and threw them into the beggar's bowl. The beggar kowtowed in gratitude. He took 2 copper coins and bought a bun from a bun shop by the street. He saw the shop assistant from the shop next door struggling to carry a box onto the carriage. He held the bun in his mouth and went forward to help carry the box onto the carriage. The shop assistant took a deep breath. Just as he was about to thank the beggar, he realized that there was no one behind the box. At this moment, a man in green walked over and asked, "Brother, may I ask where Restaurant Rui is?" The shop assistant smiled and said, "I happen to have something to do near Restaurant Rui. Follow me." The man thanked him and followed the shop assistant to Restaurant Rui. He happened to see a young man and a young woman's kite hanging on a tree. The 2 of them stood under the tree and waited. The man leaped up and easily plucked the kite. He smiled and handed it to the young man and the young woman. He said, "Go over there and fly it in an empty place." Li Mu was greeted by the people along the way. He could clearly feel the changes in Luoyang half a year ago. Li Mu was not the only one who could feel the changes. The people of Luoyang could feel it too. In the past, there was no good or evil in Luoyang. There was no right or wrong. It was chaotic and dark. Until half a year ago, a ray of light shone through the darkness. From then on, good and evil were separated in Luoyang. The officials and nobles who broke the law were punished the same as the common people, be it the hedonistic sons of rich parents, the students of the academy, the important officials in the court, the nobles of Luoyang, or even the descendants of the royal family. They could no longer trample on the law and oppress the common people. This ray of light allowed the common people to walk out from the darkness and into the sunlight. Looking at the figure walking slowly on the street, countless people had reverence in their eyes. That was the light in all of their hearts. Chapter 386. Walking on the streets of Chengdu, Li Mu found that he seemed to be more and more fond of the human world. Especially after witnessing the changes in the people in the past half a year. The achievements and joy he got from it were far from what he got from cultivation. In this state of mind, His heart was empty. Even without the clear heart technique, he could still maintain absolute peace in his heart. Somehow, he even had a kind of enlightenment. Establishing a heart for the heavens and earth. Establishing a life for the people. As long as he could practice these two words with himself, one day he could rely on the hundreds of millions of people in the Great Zhou to advance to the upper realm. Now he didn't have to do anything deliberately, and could continue to absorb psychic power from the people. He was like a walking temple. He walked slowly on the street. What he saw and what he heard was the ecology of Shendu, only a duck-like voice was mixed in it, which seemed a little out of place. Fortune-telling, 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 infertility treatment, ensuring the birth of a fat baby. You're not allowed to be free, you're not allowed to be free. This voice was a little familiar. Li Mu looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a sloppy Taoist priest squatting at a corner of the street. In front of him was a Bagua diagram, and beside him was a flag with the words Divine Strategy written on it. The Taoist priest's spiritual sense was very sharp. The moment Li Mu looked over, the Taoist priest raised his head and looked at him. When he saw Li Mu, the Taoist priest was stunned for a moment. Then he jumped up from the ground and said in amazement, "Why is it you again?" Li Mu walked over, smiled at him, and said, "Senior, we meet again." The Taoist priest scratched his head and said, "Why do I always run into you wherever I go? That's not right." As he spoke, his tone suddenly changed. He grabbed Li Mu's wrist and said in shock, You have a good fortune." Li Mu said, "In the past few months, I encountered some opportunities." The old man let go of his hand and muttered, "Bullshit opportunity, why can't I encounter such an opportunity?" Thinking back to more than a year ago, when he first met the young man in front of him, he was just a mortal who had lost his 7 souls and didn't have long to live. When he saw him for the second time, he was already in the omnipotent realm. Only half a year had passed, and when he saw him again, he was already in the creation realm. This made the scruffy Taoist priest doubt his life. At this rate, in another year or so, wouldn't he be inferior to him? He returned to his original position, and waved his hand at Li Mu. Go, go, go. Let this old man be alone." Li Mu glanced at him, and then turned to leave. When he met an old friend, he only went up to greet him out of politeness. To Li Mu a year ago, peak 6th realm cultivators were unreachable. But now he was in close contact with 7th realm cultivators every day. In his eyes, 6th realm cultivators were just SOSO. It wasn't until Li Mu's figure disappeared that the scruffy Taoist priest raised his head and looked in the direction he left. His heart was bitter and indescribable. He muttered, "Thief. God, this is not fair, not fair." Li Mu quickly forgot about the scruffy Taoist priest. Although he had avenged Li Qing, there were still some leftover problems. As the Great Zhou FBI, some of the priests in the Department of Worship enjoyed the cultivation resources provided by the Imperial Court, but they didn't do anything for the Imperial Court, and didn't listen to the orders of the Ministry of Personnel. They even became the private soldiers of the old party, disobeying imperial orders and doing whatever they wanted. Li Mu had thought of cleaning up the Department of Worship a long time ago. The Department of Worship was nominally under the command of the Ministry of Personnel, but it wasn't an office under the Ministry of Personnel. Before the Empress ascended the throne, the Department of Worship was directly responsible to the Empress. After the Empress ascended the throne, because she couldn't subdue the Department of Worship controlled by the old party, she established the internal guards. The bamboo guards of the plum, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum guards were used to replace the Department of Worship. Of course, whether it was strength or resources, the internal guards were far inferior to the Department of Worship. The Department of Worship was supported by the Great Zhou's national treasury. Every year, large amounts of spiritual jade, fulu, talismans, and other cultivation resources were allocated from the national treasury. The internal guards were subsidized by the Empress herself. The highest cultivation of the internal guards was only 5th realm. In the Department of Worship, there were 2 great priests who were both 6th realm cultivators. There were also dozens of 5th realm priests. In Changle Palace, when he was eating with the Empress, Li Mu told her about cleaning up the Department of Worship, but the Empress was a little absent-minded. Zhou didn't answer Li Mu's question. Instead, she asked, "Tell me, What's so good about being the empress? Why can they disregard other people's lives and even their own for this position? Zhou Chuan had already been sent away from the Immortal's capital today. Li Mu wasn't surprised that the empress would feel this way. To the empress, there was indeed nothing good about being the empress. She wasn't keen on power, nor was she greedy for beauty. She didn't have anyone in her harem, and she didn't want to review memorials. To her, this position was a prison. But to others, controlling the life and death of hundreds of millions of people and becoming the ruler of the most powerful country in Zhou province was already a fatal temptation. Moreover, after becoming the empress, she could legitimately replenish her harem. If Li Mu was the empress, he could legitimately make Lu Hanyan empress and Li Qing noble consort. Wanwan and Xiao Bai would be fair consort and virtuous consort. No one would have to be jealous of anyone. It was only natural for the empress to take in concubines. Just thinking about it made one feel that it was wonderful. There would no longer be a fire in the harem or an azura field. Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu and said, "I'm asking you a question. What are you laughing at?" Li Mu no longer fantasized. He withdrew his smile and said, "Your Majesty, not everyone is like your Majesty who doesn't like power. To them, becoming the emperor above hundreds of millions of people is a fatal attraction." Zhou Yi asked, "You too?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "This isn't my dream." Zhou Yi continued to ask, "Then what is your dream?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "This subject's dream is to take my wives to travel all over the 10 continents and 3 islands, see all kinds of sceneries, and finally find a quiet and secluded place. When I'm not cultivating, I'll raise flowers and vegetables and live the life of an ordinary person." Zhou Yi glanced at him and calmly asked, "You want to leave the imperial court?" Li Mu heard the fluctuation in her tone. To prevent her from thinking that he wanted to run away, he added, "Of course not now." Zhou Yi asked, "Then when?" Li Mu said, "After I've helped your Majesty clear away all obstacles and solve all problems." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "I feel that the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Demon Sect are the biggest obstacles and troubles in my heart. I won't keep you for long. Once the Demon Sect is destroyed, the Ghost Realm is subdued, and the Yao Kingdom is pacified, I will let you go." Li Mu was dumbfounded. The Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Demon Sect. Which of these 3 powers hadn't existed for as long as the Great Zhou? Even if the Great Zhou perished, they might not necessarily perish. To put it bluntly, she wanted him to work for her for the rest of his life. Even when the Jade Emperor made things difficult for Sun Wukong, he didn't go so far. It was better to wait for the chickens to finish their rice, the dogs to finish their noodles, and the fire to burn out the logs. This way, Li Mu would at least have something to look forward to. At this moment, he had already decided to stick to his original plan. After helping her condense the next strand of Emperor Qi, he would take Lu Hanyan and the others and run away. There was a wider world outside, and he didn't want to waste his life on the Empress. Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "What, you're not willing?" Li Mu squeezed out a smile and said, "I'm willing to go through water and tread on fire for your Majesty. Not to mention destroying the Demon Sect, subduing the Ghost Realm, and pacifying the Yao Kingdom. When I'm strong enough, I can even go to the Eastern Sea and catch a dragon to be your Majesty's mount." Li Mu had long since figured out the Empress's personality. Ordinary women also liked to hear nice things, but the Empress wasn't an ordinary woman. She liked to flatter and praise even more. Regardless of whether she could do it or not, she had to get through this hurdle first. Zhou Yi asked, "Is what you said true?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Everything I said came from the bottom of my heart." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "Then swear to the heavenly Tao." Li Mu stared blankly at the Empress. He didn't expect that she wouldn't play by the rules. If he had said this to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, they would definitely have covered Li Mu's mouth before he swore to the heavenly Tao. Then, either coquettishly or angrily, they would say, "Who told you to swear? I don't want you to swear," and so on and forget about this matter. But the Empress, it was fine if she didn't stop him, but she actually took the initiative to make him swear? Was an oath to the heavenly Tao something that could be casually sworn? Li Mu felt that the trust between humans was gone. "What, you're not willing?" Zhou looked at Li Mu and asked, "Could it be that everything you said just now was false?" Li Mu wanted nothing more than to slap his own mouth, but it was obviously too late. Looking at the Empress' serious eyes, Li Mu slowly raised his right hand, bent his thumb, and pointed to the sky. He gritted his teeth and said, "I, Li Mu, swear to the heavenly Tao that only after the demon sect is destroyed, the ghost realm is subdued, and the demon country is pacified, can I leave your majesty. If I violate it, I will not have a good ending," Zhou said. "Also, I really want to have a dragon as a mount." Li Mu's lips moved and said, "Your Majesty, how about we forget about this? The dragon race has a fishy smell, and it's slippery. It's not suitable to be a mount." Zhou glared at him. "Hurry up." Chapter 387. Walking out of Changle Palace, Li Mu had to admit that he had been careless this time. He had been forced by the Empress to swear an oath to the heavens that he would only leave her after helping her destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm, and pacify the Yao kingdom. Fortunately, Li Mu was quick-witted and changed a phrase when he swore. He said that he would not leave her until he finished these things, and not Shindu or Great Zhou. If he could abduct the Empress, then it would not be considered leaving her. Whether or not the Great Zhou could destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm, and pacify the Yao kingdom was a matter for the Great Zhou court. In any case, Li Mu had fulfilled his oath to the Empress. Didn't she like to plant flowers? When the time came, he would open a garden for her next door to where he, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing lived in seclusion. As long as she did not feel bored, she could plant flowers for the rest of her life. Li Mu looked back and twitched the corner of his mouth. If she wanted to trick him, she would have to cultivate for a few more years. After swearing the oath, he once again brought up the matter of purging the office of consecration. What made Li Mu feel helpless was that, at some point in time, the Empress had handed over all the things that should have been done by her to him. She did not even hand it over to Li Mu. Instead, it was Li Mu who raised the problem and solved it himself. Now, she wanted Li Mu to be her slave for the rest of his life. If she had not given him so much and treated him so well, Li Mu might have gone back to inherit the Fulu school long ago. What really made Li Mu feel that he owed her was that the Empress had always stood by his side when facing the Zhou family and himself. She had also given him the greatest trust and the greatest freedom to reverse the verdict and take revenge for Li Qing's father. If he ran away like this, it would be too heartless. For a woman to treat him like this, even if Li Mu could not repay her with his body, he could not be so heartless. Consecrated office. Lord May of the Inner Guards had just arrived. He left behind an imperial edict and then floated away. The contents of the imperial edict made countless consecrators angry and dissatisfied. From today onwards, the consecration department would be under the management of the Bamboo Guards. Although they did not need to be merged into the Bamboo Guards, the Bamboo Guards Vice Commander Li Mu would be in charge of the consecration department. The Department of Offerings had always been a special existence in the imperial court. They were not from the academy, nor were they officials of the imperial court. Their relationship with the Great Zhou court was more like cooperation than subordination. The imperial court provided the consecrators with cultivation resources, while the consecrators worked for the imperial court. Both sides took what they needed. The Department of Consecration had always been an independent department, never under the jurisdiction of an official of the court. Even the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs could only request for a consecrator, and not order them to do so. This imperial edict shook the position of the consecrated division. For cultivators, a country was already a vague concept to them. What cultivators pursued their entire lives was supreme strength and the ethereal heavenly path. Most cultivators despised becoming a lackey of the imperial court, or rather, a lackey. However, the path of cultivation was not something that could be achieved by one person alone. Cultivation required resources, and cultivation resources were not easy to obtain for most cultivators without any background. In order to obtain cultivation resources like spiritual jades more easily, some cultivators with some strength would put down their pride and choose to become a consecrator of the imperial court. But this did not mean that they were willing to be under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. After becoming a consecrator, these people were still more unruly than the officials of the imperial court. They would submit to the strong but would not submit to official rank. What is the Empress thinking? She actually let a brat control us? Although his talent is not bad, his cultivation has only just reached the 5th realm. What right does he have to command us? He killed more than 20 people from the old faction and forced Li Mu to ask for exile. Has Li Mu's hand finally reached the Department of Offerings? I don't know if you can tolerate it, but I can't. We must express our stance in protest. Everyone, don't come to the Department of Offerings tomorrow. Doesn't he want to be the master of the Department of Offerings? Just let him be the master of the Department of Offerings. Most of the consecrators in the Department of Offerings were opposed to this matter. If the Empress let a 6th realm cultivator take charge of the Department of Offerings, it would be fine. But Li Mu was only at the 5th realm, and had just reached the 5th realm. Any random consecrator here was stronger than him. To make them listen to the orders of a weakling was something that was very difficult to accept. Of course, among them, there was also a large portion who had long been bribed by the benefits of the old faction and harbored enmity towards Li Mu. Under this enmity, there were very quickly people who began to incite the other consecrators to take Li Mu down a notch. A group of people noisily left the Department of Offerings. 2 elders with similar appearances stood in the courtyard with their hands behind their backs. The elder on the left said, "What do you think?" The elder on the right thought for a moment and said, "Killing him a little is good for his spirit. We have to let him know that the Department of Offerings is not a place where he can behave atrociously." The Empress temporarily placed the Department of Offerings under the Bamboo Guards. As the deputy commander of the Bamboo Guards, Li Mu naturally became the direct superior of the Department of Offerings. A few days ago, he had done a detailed search for information on the Department of Offerings. Currently, there were 2 6th realm cultivators in the Department of Offerings. Both of them had just reached the 6th realm several years ago, and they were a pair of twin brothers. For the Imperial Court, 5th realm consecrators were easy to recruit, but 6th realm high consecrators were very difficult to recruit. When one's cultivation reached this level, they could already be considered one of the few powerful cultivators in the world. Whether it was out of dignity or the pursuit of a higher realm, they would not be willing to be the Imperial Court's lackeys. This also led to the Imperial Court having to pay a huge price every time they recruited a 6th realm cultivator. Not only did the Imperial Court have to provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades every year, but they also had to satisfy their various requests. After Li Mu saw the benefits of the 2 high consecrators, even he wanted to become a high consecrator himself. Li Mu could do what they could do, and Li Mu could do what they could not. He could guarantee that it would be worth more than the cost. If the Imperial Court gave him the resources given to these 2 people, Li Mu could guarantee that he would be able to create even greater value for the Imperial Court than them. Most importantly, these 2 people did not make much of a contribution every year. Li Mu even killed several dozen elders of the demon sect. The contributions of these 2 high consecrators to the Imperial Court were greater than the contributions of the entire Department of Offerings. However, other than the Empress's love, he did not receive anything else. This made Li Mu feel very unbalanced. He walked into the Department of Offerings and found it abnormally quiet. There were about 100 or so consecrators in the Imperial Court. Not everyone was at the Department of Offerings every day, but no matter the time, there should be at least 10 people on duty here. However, Li Mu went through all the duty rooms and did not see a single person. He found an old man cleaning in the backyard. After asking, he found out that there were usually at least 20 consecrators in the Department of Offerings, but today there was not a single one. It was obvious that they were targeting him. The entire Department of Offerings was more united than Li Mu had imagined. There was no one in the Department of Offerings, so there was no point for Li Mu to stay here. He said to the old man cleaning, "Tell them that in 3 days, all the consecrators in the divine capital must report to the Department of Offerings. Those who do not make it in 3 days will be expelled from the Department of Offerings." Before leaving the Department of Offerings, Li Mu took a list of consecrators with him. On the list, it was clearly written which consecrators were out on missions, and which ones did not have missions to stay in the divine capital. It was also very simple to inform them. The consecrators were treated very well. There was an entire square in the divine capital dedicated to consecrators. Among them, only Realm 4 consecrators could be allocated a courtyard with 2 entrances. Realm 5 consecrators lived in residences with at least 3 entrances and 3 entrances. The 2 great consecrators' residences both had 5 entrances and were fully staffed with servant girls and servants. When he learned of this news, Li Mu even cried out on behalf of old Zhang for a while. In truth, when he had first arrived in the divine capital, he would not have had to work so hard if he wanted to live in a larger residence. He only needed to resign his official position and join the Department of Offerings, and he would immediately be given a courtyard with 2 entrances, or even 3 entrances. The imperial court treated these outsiders much better than the officials. Li Mu's request that all the consecrators in the Department of Offerings must report to the Department of Offerings within 3 days was quickly made known to all the consecrators. What does this mean? If we're expelled from the Department of Offerings within 3 days, can he expel everyone if none of us go? I'd like to see what he'll do when he's the only one left in the Department of Offerings. That's not good. Li Mu is not to be trifled with. Look at all the things he's done in the past. Which one of them wasn't serious? What if he really expels all of us? Would a Department of Offerings with only him still be called a Department of Offerings? When the time comes, the one to be expelled will only be Li Mu. He'll have to invite us back in the same way he expelled us. Since that's the case, let's not go. After leaving the yamen, Li Mu passed by the Department of Offerings on his way home and swept his gaze over it. Tomorrow was the 3-day deadline. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be tomorrow, but he was clear that a new official would make 3 sweeping fires. The first fire had to burn brighter. If he couldn't establish his authority, he wouldn't be able to mingle in the Department of Offerings in the future. The current problem was that the Department of Offerings had as many experts as there were clouds. That place was not the imperial court, and the offerings were not officials of either party. Any sort of open or secret schemes were useless. In that place, absolute strength was the only thing that mattered. Unfortunately, Li Mu's own strength was not great, and he was also a commander without any reliable helpers. Just by himself, how could he contend against a group of experts of the same level? Fortune-telling, 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 treating infertility, guaranteeing the birth of a fat child. As he walked down the street, a familiar voice once more sounded by his ear. Li Mu looked in a certain direction, and suddenly thought of a plan. At the corner of the street, the slovenly Taoist priest was currently soliciting customers. In front of his divination stall, a shadow suddenly appeared. He raised his head and glanced at Li Mu, then waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly. Quickly leave, quickly leave. This old man doesn't want to see you. This time Li Mu did not leave. Looking at the Taoist priest, he said, Senior's cultivation is so high. To be a fortune teller is a waste of talent. I don't know if Senior wants to become a offerings in the imperial court. Offerings? The Taoist priest jumped up from the ground, glaring angrily at Li Mu. Gritting his teeth, he said, What kind of person is this old man? This old man doesn't even care about the 6 great sects. What is the Great Zhou court? You actually want this old man to be a dog of the imperial court. If this wasn't the divine capital, this old man would definitely turn you into a dog first. Li Mu continued, With Senior's cultivation, if you join the Department of Offerings, you can become a great offering and live in a 5-sectioned residence. The imperial court will also provide you with maids and servants. The Taoist priest looked at Li Mu and said, Before this old man changes his mind, you'd best leave quickly. Li Mu shook his head, saying, Senior probably doesn't want the heavenly fortune talisman either. Just as he turned around, someone grabbed his wrist. The Taoist priest grabbed Li Mu's hand and said seriously, Whether it's the heavenly fortune talisman or not isn't important. The main thing is that this old man wants that big residence. You're still young, so you don't understand. After drifting for a lifetime, when you get older, what you seek is a stable place, a place that can shelter you from the wind and rain. Oh right, you mentioned the heavenly fortune talisman just now. What? Is it a heavenly fortune talisman if you join the Department of Offerings? P.S. Recommending the Book of the Old Days by the Bear-Wolf Dog. The world is about to be in chaos. Demons are emerging in an endless stream. Chu Qiguang is guarding his territory. Looking at the demons working peacefully and the old employees who have just turned into zombies, he shouted, "How dare you call the sun and moon to change the sky?" Chapter 388. From the sloppy Taoist priest's reaction, Li Mu knew that he had made the right bet. All 6th-level cultivators would eventually face a problem: their lifespan. Without reaching the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would not be able to break through the limits of mortals. 260 years or 120 years was their life and death moment. If they were mortals, then it would be fine. Although 260 years was a long enough lifespan, mortals could not escape from old age, sickness, and death. Most people could not even live past 160 years. So naturally they would not encounter a situation where their lifespan ran out. But cultivators were different. As long as a 6th-level cultivator did not seek death like the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master or the Nether Saint, they would not die so easily. The only thing that could kill them was time. A heavenly secret talisman could buy them 10 years of lifespan. In these 10 years, as long as they broke through to the 7th level, they would immediately gain another 60 years of lifespan. Thus, there was no need to be envious of these 6th-level cultivators, especially those at the peak of the 6th level. Although they were incomparably prominent in front of others, they might not have many years left in their lifespan. Although their cultivation was not as high as theirs, from now on, they could live longer than them. Li Mu looked at the sloppy Taoist priest and said, "The imperial court has always been generous to the offerings. As long as Senior joins the offerings department, I guarantee that you will receive a heavenly secret talisman within a year." Although the materials for the heavenly secret talisman were precious, if the imperial court wanted to gather them, they could also gather a few sets. After the excitement just now, the old man had already calmed down. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "Kid, don't try to trick me. The heavenly secret talisman is a saint-level Fulu. Even those old fellows in the Fulu school could not draw it. Who in the Great Zhou court can draw a saint-level talisman?" Seeing was believing. Li Mu stretched out his hand and swiped at the air in front of him. An illusory image of a Fulu covered in mysterious runes appeared before the Taoist priest's eyes. He could easily reproduce the Fulu that he had once drawn. Taoist priest looked at Fulu on the screen, and his eyes lit up. "Saint level, it's really a saint level." Then his face was filled with smiles again as he said, "To be honest, although this old man has spent most of his life traveling outside, this old man was born in the Great Zhou dynasty and can be considered a citizen of the Great Zhou dynasty. It is only right for me to do something for the Great Zhou dynasty. This old man will enter the Department of Consecration." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Senior is truly righteous. Tomorrow morning, you can directly report to the Veneration Department." After bidding farewell to the Taoist priest, Li Mu finally felt at ease. In the end, the consecrated office was a place where strength spoke. Without a super powerhouse holding down the fort, Li Mu did not have the confidence to speak. Speaking of which, exchanging a divine secret talisman for a powerhouse at the peak of the 6th realm was a very good deal. Unfortunately, the materials needed for the saint-level Fulu were very precious, and this talisman could not be mass-produced. Otherwise, as long as the Empress announced to the world that she would give a divine secret talisman to any 6th realm powerhouse who joined the consecrated office, the Department of Consecrated Office of the Great Zhou would be the most powerful force in the 10 continents and 3 islands. What 6 schools and 4 sects? Even the demonic path would not be able to compete with them. The divine secret talisman was not only useful for 6th realm powerhouses, but also for 7th realm powerhouses. Although the divine secret talisman did not increase the lifespan of powerhouses above the transcendent realm by that much, every year of lifespan increased the chances of advancing. Every time one advanced a level in the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. If they made the right bet, their lifespan would be extended by 60 years. Who would not be tempted? As long as there were enough materials, he could let the Empress visit him every few days. With the help of her talisman, Li Mu was confident that he could turn the consecrated office into a retirement home for the super powerhouses of the continent. Of course, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. This plan at present could only be imagined by Li Mu. Early the next morning, Li Mu arrived at the consecrated office a quarter of an hour later than the usual time. Inside the consecrated office, it was quiet. Apart from the old man sweeping the floor, there was no one else in the entire consecrated office. Li Mu moved a chair and sat in the courtyard of the consecrated office. The old man sweeping the floor obeyed Li Mu's instructions. He took an incense burner, inserted an incense stick, lit it, and placed it in the courtyard of the consecrated office. Li Mu looked at the incense stick and said, "Tell them, before this incense stick burns out, if they do not report to the consecrated office, they will be expelled from the consecrated office, and all the rewards bestowed by the imperial court will be withdrawn. From now on, they will no longer enjoy the treatment of a consecrated." The old man walked out of the consecrated office and walked briskly towards a nearby market. Dun Square. There were hundreds of markets in the Immortal's capital, each with its own function. Dun Square was a residential market, located in the core area of the Immortal's capital. Although it was a residential market, the people who lived in the market were not commoners, officials, or nobles. They were consecrated members recruited by the imperial court. The consecrated members were the same as the officials of the imperial court. They ate the salary of the imperial court, and their treatment was even better than the officials. Every person had a house bestowed by the imperial court, and all the maids and servants in the house were available. In a certain house in Dun Square, 10 or so consecrated members were gathered together. Expelling them from the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick. Who is he trying to scare? Expelling everyone from the consecrated office. How will he explain this to the imperial court? This morning, not a single person went. I want to see how he will deal with this. After discussing for a while, they decided to continue staying here. In some other houses in the square, there was also hesitation in the eyes of some people. Should we go or not? Li Mu is not someone to be trifled with. The Empress also favors him so much. How many people have fallen into his hands? If he really expels us, where will our future cultivation resources come from? Why don't we just forget about it? The Xiao family has not given us any benefits. We have no need to oppose Li Mu. Li Mu sat in the consecrated office. Ever since the incense stick had burned halfway, consecrated members had begun to walk in from outside. After clasping their hands to Li Mu, they returned to their respective duty rooms. There was also a portion of people who stood outside the consecrated office, chatting and laughing with the people beside them. They were all consecrated members of the consecrated office, but they did not walk in. Their gazes would occasionally glance at the incense stick, as if they were waiting for something. Only when the last stick of incense had burned out did they walk into the consecrated office. If they were frightened by Li Mu on his first day at the consecrated office, and obediently returned to the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick, then they could forget about having a good life in the future. The reason they had waited until the incense stick had burned out before walking into the consecrated office was to give Li Mu a show of strength. They had to let Li Mu know that the consecrated office was not the same as the imperial court. However, when the incense stick had burned out and the first person outside the door wanted to walk into the consecrated office, a figure blocked their way. That fifth realm consecrated looked at Li Mu, raised his eyebrows and asked, "Lord Li, what are you doing?" Li Mu said indifferently, "This is the consecrated office." That consecrated said, "Could it be that we consecrated members cannot enter the consecrated office?" Li Mu said, "In the past, yes, but not now." Before the incense stick has burned out, everyone who did not report to the consecrated office has already been expelled from the consecrated office. I will give you all 1 day to move out of Dun Square, and henceforth do not act in the name of consecrated members of the Great Zhou. That consecrated did not expect that Li Mu would actually dare to do this. His face darkened as he said, "Lord Li, this is your first day at the consecrated office. Are you going to be so ruthless? As he spoke, a fierce aura emanated from his body. The consecrated behind him also had an invisible aura rising from his body. Under the pressure of this aura, a few strands of hair by Li Mu's ears were blown up, and his clothes also fluttered loudly. A piece of the green brick under his feet was crushed by his foot. The next moment, Li Mu took a step forward. Boom! An even more powerful aura erupted from his body. The dozen or so consecrated at the entrance of the consecrated office retreated several steps under this aura. The fifth realm consecrated could still barely hold on, but several fourth realm cultivators directly fainted under the impact of that aura. Li Mu looked at them and said indifferently, "From now on, you are no longer consecrated members of the Imperial Court. The consecrated office is an important place of the Imperial Court. Those who trespass into the consecrated office without permission will be expelled, and those who trespass repeatedly will be killed without mercy." Several fifth realm consecrated members struggled to resist Li Mu's aura pressure, their hearts extremely shocked. They did not expect Li Mu to be able to release such an aura when he had just advanced. In that instant, they even felt as if they were facing a sixth realm cultivator. Li Mu's strength was far stronger than they had imagined. They originally wanted to show him their strength, but now they were the ones who could not step down. Just as these people did not know how to deal with it, a gentle force swept over them. The aura emanating from Li Mu collided with this gentle force and cancelled each other out. Two elders with similar appearances slowly walked to the entrance of the consecrated office. "The head consecrated is here." "Greetings, head consecrated." Seeing the two old men, the crowd seemed to have found their backbone and bowed to greet them. The elder on the left glanced at them and said, "What are you all standing here for? Hurry up and go in." The head consecrated spoke, and these people heaved a sigh of relief. The leader was about to enter, but just as he took a step into the consecrated office, he was suddenly hit in the chest by a golden light, and his entire body was sent flying. After sending one person flying, the Dao bell shrunk to the size of a palm and floated on Li Mu's shoulder. Seeing this, the few consecrated who were about to enter immediately stopped in their tracks. They never would have thought that Li Mu would not even give face to the head consecrated. The elder who had spoken just now had a dark expression and asked, "Lord Li, what is the meaning of this?" "Nothing." Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "I have said before that those who do not last 5 minutes will be expelled from the consecrated office. These people are standing outside the consecrated office and dragging their feet until the incense burns out. Clearly, they do not want to be consecrated anymore. The consecrated office is an important place of the Imperial Court. Not just any random person can casually enter." The elder looked at him and asked slowly, "The two of us are also late. Does Lord Li want to expel the two of us from the consecrated office as well?" Sixth realm cultivators were not easy to recruit. Li Mu did not have this authority. Although Li Mu really wanted to expel them to save resources for the Imperial Court, if he really did expel them, the Imperial Court would probably also put pressure on the Empress. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Seeing that you are the head consecrated, I can make an exception this time. There will not be a next time. There is no need to wait for a next time." The elder who had not spoken all this time snorted and said coldly, "If you want to expel them today, then the two of us will voluntarily resign. You can expel us as well while you are at it." Li Mu looked at this elder in shock. There was actually such a good thing? He was just worrying about how to expel them. With the sloppy Taoist priest, who was at the peak of the sixth realm, there was no need for the two of them. Wasn't this just a waste of the Imperial Court's resources? Li Mu looked at the two of them in surprise and said, "Words are no guarantee. Why don't the two of you make an oath to the heavenly Tao?" Chapter 389. Li Mu wanted nothing more than for these two old fellows to leave the Department of Offerings. They lived in large mansions, and were served by more than a dozen maids and servants. Every year, the Imperial Court would provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades, spiritual herbs, and other cultivation resources. Despite such good treatment, they couldn't even go to work on time. The results they could produce every year were even less. Thinking about Li Mu himself, with a meager salary, worried about the emperor's heart, purged the rebels, killed the demon path, and built the link between the imperial court and the Fulu school. Besides his own official duties, he also had to approve memorials for the empress and give her special treatment. Thinking of his own efforts, the head offerings' efforts, the treatment of the head offerings, and his own treatment, Li Mu felt even more unbalanced. The two head offerings had not expected that Li Mu would be so unyielding. After expelling the two head offerings and dozens of other offerings, what was left of the Department of Offerings? Did he not think that if he really did this, how would he explain it to the imperial court? As for making them swear an oath to the heavenly Tao, this was naturally impossible. Any cultivator with a normal mind would not joke about the heavenly Tao. The two coldly snorted at the same time, clasped their hands behind their backs, and left. Li Mu was, after all, acting on the empress's orders. With their status, there was no need to say too much to Li Mu. When the Department of Offerings fell into chaos because of him, he would not be able to explain himself to the imperial court, and would naturally leave with his tail between his legs. Seeing that the two head reverends had left, those reverends who didn't report to the reverends department within the time set by Li Mu also didn't dare to step into the reverends department. They all left with gloomy faces. This was only a temporary departure. According to Li Mu's own rules, this time, more than half of the combat strength of the Department of Offerings would be expelled from the Department of Offerings. The Department of Offerings of the Great Zhou existed in name only. Once the imperial court investigated, he would not be able to bear the responsibility, and would still have to invite them back. And the offerings of the Department of Offerings were secretly rejoicing that they had changed their minds at the last moment. Li Mu didn't even give face to the great consecrator, much less them. Once they lost their status as consecrators, where would they find cultivation resources? Without a sect or family, leaving the consecrator department was the same as cutting off their cultivation path. After sending those people away, Li Mu sat back down on the chair in the courtyard of the Office of Offerings. The original intention of the consecration department was to recruit strong cultivators to serve the country. They did not want them to participate in the politics of the court. However, the consecrators were in the divine capital. These matters could not be avoided easily. The current consecrated office had already deviated from its original intentions and needed a complete change. Of course, the price of change was also huge. This time, Li Mu had expelled more than half of the consecrators of the consecration department. Although this was more beneficial for future management, the drawbacks were also obvious. The overall strength of the consecration department had severely shrunk. Although they had the unkempt Taoist priest, no matter how powerful he was only one person. He could not solve the problem of the 36 counties of Great Zhou. Right now, the Foreign Service Division urgently needed fresh blood. However, they could not expand their recruitment at will. Otherwise, the previous internal guard was a lesson to be learned. If someone with bad intentions sneaked in and gave them a fatal blow at the critical moment, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Li Mu thought for a while and stretched out his hand. A white light flashed and a black, palm-sized wooden block appeared in his hand. The four sides of the wooden block were engraved with mysterious runes. After Li Mu injected his spiritual power, these runes began to flicker and emit a faint light. After the light on the wooden block stabilized, Li Mu put the wooden block to his ear and said, "Hey, is this senior brother sect master? I'm Li Mu. Last time, we talked about the cooperation between the ancestral court and the imperial court. You promised to send some elders over. What? 10. 10 is too little, at least 30. 30 isn't much at all. What's the point of them staying in the mountains? Why don't we pull them out to temper their minds? It's good for their future cultivation." Li Mu put down the wooden box and saw the unkempt Taoist priest standing in the courtyard of the consecration department. He looked at Li Mu with a puzzled gaze and asked, "Xian Jizi is your senior brother?" Li Mu nodded. The Taoist priest thought for a while and asked again, "Then who is your master?" Li Mu said, "My master is Talisman Daozi." The Taoist priest revealed a look of understanding and said, "So it's him." Li Mu asked, "Senior, do you know my master?" The Taoist priest shook his head and said, "I'm not familiar with him." Talisman Daozi has some talent in the Fulu, but his cultivation talent is not high. His lifespan should be in these 2 years. Your master, Li Mu said, with the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets, it should be able to buy master 10 more years. The Taoist priest was stunned and then said, so the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets was given to Talisman Daozi, who drew the Fulu. As far as I know, no one in the Fulu school has this ability. Li Mu smiled and said, Senior, you don't have to worry about this. After a year, Senior's Talisman of Heavenly Secrets will be handed over. The unkempt Taoist priest didn't ask any more questions and said, what do you need me to do? Li Mu said, Senior, you only need to preside over the offerings department. The other matters will be taken care of by the offerings department below. The head reverend's greatest use in the reverend department was to intimidate others. If there weren't any sixth realm cultivators holding down the fort, the words reverend department would inevitably lose some of its grandeur. When the head offerings were truly needed, it would be when an earth-shattering event happened in a certain county. On the first day Li Mu took charge of the offerings department, he drove away more than half of the offerings and angered 2 head offerings. Soon, the news spread throughout the divine capital and caused a heated discussion among the officials. This is too ridiculous. In less than an incense stick's time, he will be expelled from the offerings department. He wants to turn the offerings department into his own. Even the 2 head offerings were angered away. Without the head offerings, the offerings department is nothing but an empty name. Let's see how Li Mu will deal with this. He will destroy the offerings department. Many officials in the court thought that Li Mu's actions were a bit excessive. In the Ministry of War, several officials discussed this matter and had different opinions. Strict adherence to orders and prohibitions. Compared to the court, he is more suited to be in the military. If he doesn't use this method, it will be difficult to get rid of the offerings department. He doesn't have to be so harsh on the 2 head offerings. After all, the offerings department still depends on them. Dawn Square. The offerings that Li Mu drove out of the offerings department were all waiting at home. The offerings department was already understaffed. Without more than half of the offerings department was simply unable to deal with the emergencies that occurred in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. Although there were many officials in the court with decent cultivation, they each had their own duties and official duties. It was impossible for them to leave their posts to deal with these matters. When the time came, it would be Li Mu begging them to return. A day later, someone knocked on the doors of these offerings. It wasn't Li Mu who knocked, but an official from the Ministry of Works. The offerings' benefits were very good. Apart from receiving a generous monthly salary, they could also live in large mansions arranged by the court and have maids and servants to serve them. Of course, the premise of all this was that they were still offerings of the court. When they were no longer offerings, all their benefits would be taken away. Is that Li Mu serious? What do we do now? Is there no one in such a large court who can control him? Why isn't the head offering saying anything? The orders of the Ministry of Works could not be disobeyed. No matter how unwilling these people were, they could only move out of their mansions. Yesterday they were still noble offerings of the Great Zhou. They lived in mansions bestowed by the court and had maids and servants to serve them. Overnight, they were driven out of their homes and became homeless wanderers. But they did not leave the divine capital. Everyone firmly believed that there would be a time for them to return. This confidence was shattered when they saw the 30 manifestation realm experts enter the offerings department. Countless former offerings stared at the doors of the offerings department in shock. Where did he find so many experts in such a short time? Is this his new consecrator? So he planned all of this. When they saw these experts, their hearts were filled with regret. They had been so fearless because without them, the offerings department would not be able to function in a short time. Who would have thought that Li Mu would only use 3 days to find people to replace them? They had only wanted to give Li Mu a show of strength, but not only had they failed to scare Li Mu, they had also lost their status as offerings. They had chosen to join the offerings department because there were no sects or clans to provide them with cultivation resources. Once they left the court, their path of cultivation would become abnormally difficult. While these former consecrated elders were feeling regretful, Li Mu, who was in the consecrated office, had a satisfied expression on his face. Xianjizi had taken his words seriously. In just 3 days, the 30 elders of the Fulu school arrived at the divine capital from Mount Baiyun. Greetings, martial uncle. The 30 people stood in 3 neat rows and bowed to Li Mu. Li Mu reached out and gestured. We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. The old man in the lead walked over to Li Mu and cupped his fists. Before we left, the sect master instructed us to listen to Martial Uncle Ling Jizi's orders when we arrive at the divine capital. Please instruct us, Martial Uncle. Li Mu felt gratified when he saw the obedient faces of these people. His own disciples were still the most obedient and sensible. What were those offerings who had looked up at the sky when they spoke? He waved his hand and told everyone, "There's no hurry. Let me arrange your accommodations first." Soon, Li Mu led everyone to the Dun Square. After he left, the doors of the offerings department closed. A few former offerings who had been pacing back and forth at the doors shook their heads in disappointment. They could only turn around and leave. After these powerhouses arrived, the doors of the offerings department were completely shut. Before long, 2 old men walked over to the doors of the offerings department. They were the 2 high offerings. They glanced at the tightly shut doors of the offerings department and slowly floated up. A moment later, the 2 of them landed heavily on the ground. The slovenly Taoist priest placed his hands on their shoulders and said indifferently, "Behave yourselves. This is not a place for you to wander around as you please." Chapter 390. After being forced down from the sky, the 2 great reverends did not turn their heads, nor did they dare to turn their heads. Although the person behind them only revealed a little bit of his aura, just this little bit of aura was enough to make them feel fearful. This was definitely a 6th realm cultivator, and a peak 6th realm cultivator at that. He was different from people like them who had just entered the 6th realm a few years ago. This kind of person already had 1 foot in the 7th realm. Although the other foot might never be able to cross over, it was still not someone the 2 of them could contend against. A peak 6th realm cultivator had the ability to kill a normal 6th realm cultivator. One of the old men said with a slightly pale face, "Senior, the 2 of us are reverends of the Great Zhou. This is the Department of Reverence." The sloppy Taoist priest patted their shoulders and said, "You 2 are reverends of the Great Zhou. Who isn't? Don't use the imperial court to pressure me. That brat said we can't enter, so we can't enter. Don't cause trouble here. If something goes wrong with this old man's Tianji talisman and my lifespan ends, I'll drag you 2 down with me." With that, his body floated up and flew back into the Department of Reverence. The twin old men looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The old man on the right muttered, "He really is a peak cultivator whose lifespan is about to end. It's best not to provoke him. How did that Li Mu recruit such a powerful cultivator?" The old man on the left knocked his head and said angrily, "Is that the point? The point is the Tianji talisman. The Tianji talisman is a Tianji talisman that can increase one's lifespan by 10 years. Although the 2 brothers still had 20 years of lifespan, 20 years was not enough for them to break through to the 7th realm. There was an insurmountable gap between the middle realm and the upper realm. Not to mention 20 years, even if they were given another 40 years, they might not have a chance. But even if they couldn't break through, who wouldn't want to live for 10 more years? In these 10 years, if they encountered a great opportunity and were lucky enough to break through, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. Which cultivator could resist the temptation of 60 more years of lifespan? Unfortunately, the heavenly secret talisman was a saint-ranked Fulu. Up until now, no one had been able to draw it. The ancestral court of Fulu school. Perhaps there were still people who had the ability to draw a saint-level Fulu, but the materials used to draw a Fulu of this level were too precious, and the success rate was too low. Even a school as profound as Fulu school could not afford the risk of failure. Could it be that the price the imperial court paid for that Taoist priest to join the Department of Offerings was a heavenly secrets talisman? No matter which sect they joined, they would not be able to obtain a heavenly secret talisman, and the cultivation resources they could obtain would not be much more than in the office of offerings. The two exchanged glances, their gazes meeting, and quickly came to a decision. The slightly thinner old man smiled and said, "Actually, spiritual jades, spiritual medicines, and the heavenly secret talisman are not important. What is important is that the two of us have been in the office of offerings for many years, and have long developed feelings for each other. We are prepared to stay in the office of offerings until the day of our death." "That's right. When will that heavenly secret talisman be given out?" Li Mu said. 5 years later. The old man frowned and asked, "So long, that senior will also only receive it in 5 years? Li Mu smiled and said, "That senior's cultivation has already reached the peak of the 6th level. He will receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time." The two of them knew that Li Mu had only said half of what he had said. Only a peak of the 6th level cultivation could receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time. Their cultivation was far inferior to his, and they would also need to work for the imperial court for a longer period of time. The thin old man thought for a while, then said, "Can we take a look at the heavenly secret talisman first?" Li Mu stretched out his hand and lightly swiped at the air, and the image of the heavenly secret talisman appeared in front of the two. Li Mu looked at them and said, "The imperial court does not have a finished product for this talisman. We will first need to gather the materials, and this will also take some time." The two old men fell into deep thought for a long time, and then the thin old man said, "Allow us to consider it." Li Mu nonchalantly said, "The two of you can do as you please." The two old men left the office of offerings and returned to their residences to continue their discussion. The success rate of a saint-level Fulu talisman is extremely low. One may be able to draw one, but not a second one. But that Taoist priest also doesn't seem like someone who's so easily fooled. He doesn't have much lifespan left, so we can only choose to believe him. We still have to wait and see. We can stay for a year. If that person really does obtain the heavenly secret talisman, it won't be too late to continue staying in the office of offerings. In the imperial palace, Li Mu had already walked to the entrance of Changel Palace. There was no need to doubt the strength of those two high reverends. Although they were not as strong as the slovenly Taoist priest, they were still solid 6th realm cultivators. In Mount Baiyun, they would also be peak leaders. If the imperial court spent a large amount of resources to raise such people as mascots, Li Mu naturally wouldn't agree to it. But if they could work for the imperial court for free, then the more the better. In the end, they were still two 6th realm cultivators. Li Mu did not intend to let them go so easily. But these old monsters who had lived for a century were not so easily fooled. If he did not show some true ability, he might not be able to intimidate them. Thus, he planned to draw a saint-level Fulu talisman right now. Before coming to the imperial palace, Li Mu specially made a trip home to tell Lu Hanyan and Li Qing that he might not return home for 3 or 4 days, and that they did not need to worry. Even for the current Li Mu, drawing a saint-level Fulu talisman was a very taxing task. Before officially drawing the talisman, he had to adjust himself to his best condition to ensure that the talisman could be successfully drawn on the first try. Just now, Li Mu used the spirit snail to inform the Empress. She agreed almost without thinking. Li Mu walked to Changel Palace and said, "In these 3 to 4 days, I may have to stay in the palace and adjust myself to my best condition." Zhou said, "Just stay in the back hall of Changel Palace. If you need anything, I will ask the apricot guards to prepare it." Li Mu said again, "My own magic power is not enough to draw a saint-level Fulu talisman. When the time comes, I will have to trouble your majesty." Zhou nodded and said, "I understand. When the time comes, I will help you." Perhaps because they had been together for a long time, Li Mu still had some distance between him and Xianjizi. But with the Empress there was none at all. With her by his side, Li Mu had no worries at all. Talisman drawing was a very ritualistic affair. Even more so when it came to high-level Fulu talismans. When the first seats of Mount Baiyun were drawing the saint-level Fulu talisman, they would burn incense and bathe half a month in advance in order to ensure the success rate. Then they would lock themselves in a quiet room and adjust their magic power, and mind to their best condition before starting to draw the talisman. This was the Empress's bedroom. Burning incense and bathing were unnecessary. What Li Mu needed to do was to draw the Tianji talisman's runes over and over again, until they formed muscle memory. This was the only way to ensure that he could fully control his magic power, while drawing the talisman. The last time he drew the Tianji talisman was a few months ago. Now that he was going to do it again, everything had to be prepared again. In these 3 days, the only thing Li Mu had to do was practice. As for the materials used to draw the talisman, the Empress had already asked Mr. Mei to prepare them. Changel Palace, back hall. On the table, the materials used to draw the talisman were placed neatly. Li Mu stood behind the table, took a deep breath, closed his eyes and said, "Your Majesty, I am ready." Zhou Yi sat cross-legged on the bed. He could not help but stand up with a shocked expression and said in a panic, "What is this?" In the divine capital, all the officials in the palace walked out and looked at the sky. They saw that the originally cloudless sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds. The dark clouds covered the sky and covered the entire divine capital. It was as if the entire world had darkened. The dark clouds were extremely low. Everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing on their chests, and they could not breathe at all. What's going on? Why is there suddenly such a phenomenon in the divine capital? I can't breathe. It's so uncomfortable. The citizens of the divine capital were also shocked by the sudden phenomenon. This doomsday-like scene made everyone uneasy. Dark clouds were still gathering in the sky. Soon they were as thick as ink. Lightning snakes danced in the dark clouds from time to time, adding a bit of fear to the scene. In the divine capital, the 4 academies. 4 figures floated up at the same time. This is heavenly tribulation. Someone has ascended to the 7th realm? No, the heavenly tribulation of the 7th realm is stronger than this. In the White Deer Academy, a middle-aged man pinched his fingers and murmured, "It's either someone ascending to the 7th realm or a precious treasure has appeared. I wonder what it is that caused this phenomenon." In the consecration department, the sloppy Taoist priest was dozing off. His eyes suddenly opened, and he instantly appeared in the courtyard. He looked at the phenomenon in the sky and was stunned for a moment. Then, shock appeared on his face and he blurted out, "Motherf asterisk Ker heavenly tribulation." Someone drew a saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker. Oh my, there's really someone in the Great Zhou court who can draw something like this. In the Dawn Square, the 2 high consecrators had long been alarmed by the phenomenon. They stood in the courtyard and looked up in shock. When the dark clouds gathered to a limit, they released tens of thousands of lightning bolts and struck in the direction of the palace. Everyone's gaze also looked at the palace. Inside the palace, the officials who were observing the weather saw the dense lightning bolts above their heads heading straight for them. All of them felt their scalps go numb and their guts go numb. Some of the weaker ones directly collapsed to the ground under the heavenly might, and even fainted. In the rear hall of the Changel Palace, Li Mu's face was incomparably pale. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he couldn't care less. The writing of the heavenly secret talisman had reached the most critical moment. The writing of the saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker this time was different from the time at White Cloud Mountain. Last time, Li Mu was in the special flask space. After he drew the Motherf asterisk Ker, the heavenly tribulation phenomenon appeared. This time, the heavenly tribulation appeared much faster than Li Mu had expected. Before the Motherf asterisk Ker was drawn, the tribulation clouds had already formed and condensed into the first wave of attacks. Thunder rumbled in his ears, but he couldn't afford to be distracted. If he was the slightest bit careless, 3 days of hard work and those precious talisman liquid would be wasted. Outside the Changel Palace, when the bolts of tribulation lightning were about to strike, the 4 walls of the divine capital suddenly flashed with a golden light. In the next moment, a golden light shield appeared above the divine capital and completely enveloped the divine capital. When the lightning bolts landed on the light shield, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no sound and no splash. Only then did some officials remember that the divine capital, as the capital of the Great Zhou, was protected by a powerful array formation. Even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses, or even seventh realm cultivators, they wouldn't be able to break through it. After realizing this, they gradually felt relieved. However, they still couldn't help but look in the direction of the Changle Palace. The target of the tribulation lightning was obviously Changle Palace. What were Her Majesty and Li Mu doing inside? Why did they summon the heavenly tribulation? In the sky, the lightning bolts in the tribulation clouds had already begun to accumulate for the second time. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu finished the last stroke in an ethereal state. The Motherf asterisk cur on the table flashed with spiritual light and slowly floated up. The heavenly secret talisman was completed. A beam of white light shot out of Li Mu's body and entered the Empress's body. Li Mu's body and mind were already exhausted to the limit. Without the support of the Empress' primordial spirit, he felt the world spin and immediately fell to the ground. However, he didn't fall to the ground. Instead, he fell into a body with a faint fragrance. Zhou Yi carried Li Mu to the bed and put him down. She said, "Rest first. Leave the rest to me." Li Mu was already exhausted to the extreme. He didn't have time to think about the soft princess Carrie just now. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu. He took off his shoes and placed them neatly by the bed. The blanket at the end of the bed also stretched out on its own and covered Li Mu's body. After doing all this, Zhou Yi's body disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, everyone in the divine capital saw an illusory figure rise rapidly from the palace and appear in the sky. As the illusory figure rose, it kept growing bigger and bigger. Soon it was hundreds of feet tall. The illusory figure was wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown. It floated above the palace. Because it was too tall, no one could see its face clearly. In the dark clouds, the second wave of tribulation lightning had already condensed and pressed down on the illusory figure. The illusory figure just pointed a finger, and the lightning immediately collapsed. At the same time, the frightening dark clouds in the sky also collapsed. After pointing a finger, the sky in the divine capital was clear and bright again. Countless people in the divine capital were deeply shocked by this scene. After they recovered from their shock, they immediately knelt on the ground and cheered loudly. "It's Her Majesty the Empress! Long live Her Majesty the Empress!" The scene just now had left an indelible memory in their hearts. Countless officials in the imperial court also couldn't recover from the shock for a long time. Although the Empress had always given them the impression that she was majestic and unapproachable, she rarely displayed her strength in front of the officials. As a result, they had almost forgotten that she was an ultimate powerhouse of the seventh realm. The heavenly tribulation that could destroy the entire divine capital was directly shattered by her pointing a finger. How powerful was this? At this moment, no matter if it was the officials of the new party or the old party, they could only submit to that indomitable figure in front of their hearts. After dispersing the tribulation clouds, the illusory figure quickly shrank and finally disappeared from the sky above the palace. Changle Palace. Li Mu didn't know how long he had slept. When he woke up again, he saw the Empress standing in front of the window. Zhou Yi looked at him and said indifferently, "Open your mouth." Li Mu opened his mouth. An ray of light flashed from her hand. A round thing appeared in Li Mu's mouth. It melted in an instant, and a pure medicinal power rushed to his limbs and bones. More than half of the magic power in his body was instantly recovered. Li Mu sat up on the bed and asked, "Your Majesty, how long have I slept?" Zhou Yi said, "About a day and a night." Including the time he had been unconscious, it was a little longer than he expected. Li Mu got off the bed and said, "I'll go home first," Zhou Yi said. "Your mind is seriously overdrawn. Rest for a while more." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No, I'll go home and rest. If I don't go back, my wife will be worried." Zhou Yi waved her hand and said, "Go, go." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Mu felt his vision blur. The next moment, he appeared in his own courtyard. Benefactor. Young Master. Xiaobai and Wanwan were swinging in the courtyard out of boredom. When they saw Li Mu, they immediately rushed over. Wanwan hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "If you didn't come back, Miss would have gone to the palace to find you." Li Mu smiled embarrassedly at Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, who had just walked out of the room, and said, I've made you worry. Li Qing was clearly relieved. Lu Hanyan walked up to him. Seeing his pale face, she whispered, "You're just a minor official, not the prime minister." He and Li Qing were still at the stage of holding hands and hugging each other. This was because compared to Li Qing, Lu Hanyan was more open and proactive. For the sake of dual cultivation, she climbed over Li Mu's window and climbed into his bed in the middle of the night. Before the two of them confirmed their relationship, Lu Hanyan was already capable of doing such things. If Li Qing was half as proactive as she might be the head wife of the Li clan now. However, this was due to the difference in their personalities. It could not be forced. Getting along with Li Qing had to be done step by step. If Lu Hanyan hadn't disturbed them yesterday, they might have already progressed from hugging each other to kissing and hugging each other. Li Mu suspected that Lu Hanyan was deliberately causing trouble, but he had no evidence. He had originally planned to continue what he hadn't finished yesterday with Li Qing tonight. However, when he returned home, he saw Hyun Jinko in the courtyard. After asking Hyun Jinko, Li Mu found out that he was here on the orders of the sect master to bring Li Qing and Lu Hanyan back to Mount Baiyun. Although the sect master had only taken Li Qing as his disciple as a temporary measure, this matter was already known to everyone. In everyone's hearts, Li Qing was the disciple of the Fulu school's sect master. As one of the 6 Taoist sects, the Fulu school's sect master naturally couldn't be careless about accepting a disciple. This time, Hyun Jinko was bringing Li Qing back to the mountain for the purpose of holding the disciple acceptance ceremony. At that time, apart from the sect masters and elders of the various sects of the Fulu school, the other 5 Taoist sects, such as the Danding sect, the Spirit Array sect, the Xuanzong sect, the South sect, and the North sect, would also send important figures to participate in the ceremony. Lu Hanyan would also participate in this ceremony. When Yu Zhenzi had taken her as his disciple, although he had extorted the Fulu school once, he hadn't held the disciple acceptance ceremony. This was because this kind of ceremony was only held by grand elders or first seats whose cultivation had reached the 7th realm. Yu Zhenzi's cultivation had originally been at the peak of the 6th realm. After returning to the mountain this time and receiving Mount Baiyun's inheritance, he had already successfully advanced to the 7th realm. Her and Xianjizi's disciple acceptance ceremony would be held together. Hyun Jinko looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, do you want to return to the mountain with us? During this ceremony, senior brother sect master should introduce some experts from the other 5 sects to you." Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "When will the ceremony be held?" Hyun Jinko said, "The ceremony needs to be prepared in the other 5 sects, including the South sect, the North sect, the Xuanzong sect, and the others will all need time." It made her want to urgently improve her strength. Now the situation was completely different from that time. Whether it was Li Mu or her, if they were to face off against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon again, the latter would definitely be the one in a difficult situation. These days, each of them had been working hard for their own futures. They had also completed their growth and transformation. After Lu Hanyan and Li Qing left, Li Mu looked at Wanwan and Xiaobai and asked, "What did she say to you just now?" Xiaobai immediately said, "Sister Lu said that when she and Sister Qing are not around, we should look after our benefactor and not let our benefactor provoke other little vixens in Luoyang." Wanwan covered Xiaobai's mouth and said, "Miss said that we can't tell young master." Li Mu spanked her butt and said unhappily, "Do you only have eyes for your miss?" Wanwan covered her butt and said with grievance, "Young master already has Xiaobai. Don't provoke other vixens." She blinked her big clear eyes. There was a pleading look in her eyes. Li Mu met her gaze and almost lost his mind. He covered Wanwan's eyes and pressed down on her, but a few more times. He said angrily, "How many times have I told you not to use your eye technique on me?" Chapter 392. With Lu Hanyan by her side, Wanwan's progress was also very fast. Although her cultivation level was still at the third realm, her ocular techniques were becoming more and more powerful. Even Li Mu couldn't control himself after looking at her pair of big, watery eyes for a long time. Lu Hanyan left, but Wanwan was left behind to act as Li Mu's spy. Fortunately, Li Mu had Xiaobai. In this family, she was the only one who was wholeheartedly loyal to him. Okay. Li Mu put Wanwan down and asked, "They're gone. There are only 3 of us. What are we eating tonight?" Wanwan became energized at the mention of food. She rubbed her butt as she hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "Let's eat barbecued meat." "No, let's eat hot pot again." "No, barbecued meat again." "How about hot pot again?" Wanwan was very conflicted about whether to eat hot pot or barbecued meat. In the end, Li Mu decided to eat hot pot and barbecued meat at the same time. After eating and drinking to their fill, she and Xiaobai cleaned up and washed the dishes. Li Mu went to the backyard and continued to repair the law bell. A complete law bell was very important to him. The sooner he repaired it, the sooner his family's safety would be completely guaranteed. However, he knew that those small spells that had never appeared in this world were almost used up. If the law bell couldn't be completely repaired before they were used up, he could only wait for it to slowly repair itself. However, if that was the case, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. A year or even several years was very likely. And this was under the condition that Li Mu had already repaired most of the cracks. If it weren't for Li Mu's intervention, it would probably take dozens or even hundreds of years just by relying on its self-repair ability. The next day, Li Mu went to the palace as usual. There wasn't much to do in the Imperial Secretariat recently. Li Mu handled his own business in the Imperial Secretariat in the morning. In the afternoon, he went to Changle Palace to help the Empress approve memorials and discuss the reform of the Department of Imperial Offerings with her. In Changle Palace, Li Mu sat at the side, carefully reading the important memorials. Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the dragon throne, reading a book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. Occasionally, she would raise her head to look at Li Mu. Seeing that he was seriously correcting the memorials, she lowered her head again to read. By the time Zhou Yi came to her senses, she had already been in the yamen for a long time. She looked up at Li Mu again and asked, "It's been a quarter of an hour. Why haven't you gone back yet?" Li Mu flipped open a new memorial. Without raising his head, he said, "My wife has returned to Mount Baiyun. I'm not in a hurry to return today. I'll read a few more memorials." Zhou Yi unconsciously sat up straight and asked, "Which wife?" "Li Mu. Both of them went." "How long will you be gone?" 3 or 4 months. Zhou Yi put down the book in her hand and said, "Then you're not in a hurry to go back. Finish reading these memorials first." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that won't do. Xiaobai and Wanwan are still waiting for me to eat at home." Zhou Yi said, "I'll have the Mei Wei bring them to the palace. I haven't seen the little fox in a long time. I'll also order the Imperial kitchen to prepare some food. In a while, you can all eat at my place." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then he could only nod and say, Then okay." It seemed that ever since Lu Hanyan came to Chengdu, the Empress hadn't gone to the Li Manor. In any case, there was no one at home. It didn't make much of a difference if he went back sooner or later. It was better to work overtime in the palace and get a working meal. Soon Mr. Mei went to the Li Manor to pick up Wanwan and Xiaobai. It was Wanwan's first time entering the palace. At first she was a little reserved. However, under the influence of Xiaobai, she soon became relaxed. The chatter of the 2 girls brought some liveliness to the usually lifeless Changle Palace. Li Mu noticed that when the Empress looked at Wanwan and Xiaobai, who were chasing each other in Changle Palace, there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. Li Mu's impression of the Empress was that she rarely smiled. At most, she was expressionless. Perhaps she saw her own teenage years in Wanwan and Xiaobai. However, their teenage years should be different. Wanwan and Xiaobai were at the age of innocence. At the Empress age, she should have become the crown princess and officially started her unfortunate life. While Li Mu was reviewing the reports, the Empress took Wanwan and Xiaobai to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers. Mr. May once said that the flowers in the imperial garden were all planted by the Empress herself. Planting and nurturing flowers was her greatest hobby. Who didn't like these beautiful things? If he really had the chance to kidnap the Empress in the future and live in seclusion with her, he would let her plant flowers all around the house. Every day, when he opened the door, he would reap the joy of the whole day. After finishing the last report, Li Mu left Changle Palace and walked towards the Imperial Garden. Although he had been to Changle Palace more than 100 times, his fixed route was from the Secretariat to Changle Palace. He had never been to other places. Fortunately, Li Mu knew the direction of the Imperial Garden. After walking out of Changle Palace, he walked in a direction. After a few hundred steps, Li Mu suddenly sensed something and stopped in his tracks. He turned to look at a palace next to him. His heart was pounding. Suddenly, he had a strong urge to step into this palace. It seemed that there was something in this palace that was attracting him. Li Mu looked up at the top of the palace and saw the words Ancestral Temple. He subconsciously walked towards the palace, but before he could get close, a loud shout suddenly came from the palace. "Get lost!" At the same time, a strong aura swept out from the palace and pressed down on Li Mu. Li Mu took a few steps back. His hair fluttered behind him, and his clothes fluttered. However, he also condensed an extremely strong force on his body. The two forces collided and formed a powerful impact. In the sky, several floating clouds suddenly scattered. At the same time Li Mu's telekinesis condensed into force, a dragon's roar came from the palace. Then, a golden light suddenly flew out. It was a golden dragon. After flying out of the palace, it rushed towards Li Mu. The golden dragon was very fast. Li Mu had no time to dodge, nor did he try to. He did not feel any threat from the golden dragon. The golden dragon flew to Li Mu's side and instantly wrapped around his body. In the next moment, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. He felt that the telekinesis he had accumulated was quickly flowing into the golden dragon's body. Li Mu controlled his telekinesis so that it would not be taken away by the golden dragon. He grabbed the golden dragon's body with one hand, wanting to fling it away. However, his hand passed through the golden dragon's body. The dragon was actually an illusory object. It did not have a physical body at all. Seeing that the telekinesis he had painstakingly accumulated was about to be taken away by the dragon, Li Mu made up his mind and used the guiding technique to compete with it. The man and the dragon were evenly matched in the contest for the telekinesis. Neither could do anything to the other. At this moment, 3 figures walked out of the palace. The 3 of them were old men with white hair and beards. They wore crowns on their heads, which were different from the Empress's crown. They wore black dragon robes, and the golden dragon embroidered on their banners only had 4 claws. What shocked Li Mu was that the powerful aura emitted from the 3 of them was not weaker than the scruffy Taoist priests. There were actually 3 peak 6th realm experts in the palace. Seeing the golden dragon coiling around Li Mu's body, an old man's face darkened. He said coldly, "Those who disturb the Emperor's aura should be punished by death." He stretched out a withered finger and pointed at Li Mu from afar. A powerful force of heaven and earth quickly gathered. An illusory finger appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. A terrifying aura was emitted from the finger. He was about to summon the Dao Bell to defend himself when a figure appeared in front of him. At this moment, the old man's right index finger had already pressed down. Crack! His outstretched finger was directly broken. He ignored his broken finger and looked at the figure in front of Li Mu in shock and anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "What are you doing?" Li Mu was a little angry when he saw this. The psychokinesis on the Empress was something that both Li Mu and her had worked hard for a long time. It was not easy for them to condense it, but it was all for someone else. He felt injustice for the Empress. After visiting the ancestral temple, Li Mu didn't stay here for long and walked out with the Empress. Not long after the two walked out, in the corner of the ancestral temple, 3 elders who were sitting cross-legged on prayer mats with their eyes closed slowly opened their eyes. One of the elders snorted. Is this still the crown princess? She has changed. She wouldn't be so disrespectful to us in the past. Another elder said. She was set up by the Zhou family to inherit the Emperor Qi and almost died. Sitting in this position, she was already full of resentment. How can her personality not change? The last elder said slowly. That's not important. In the past 6 months, the speed of condensing the Emperor Qi has obviously increased. I'm afraid it will mature again in 20 years. We need to urge them to work hard and cultivate. If they can enter the 6th realm, then they will have full confidence to refine the Emperor Qi. Chang'e Palace. Li Mu, Wanwan, Xiaobai, and the Empress were eating hot pot together. After walking around the ancestral temple with the Empress, Li Mu gained a lot of knowledge. So this was how the Emperor Qi that was related to the inheritance of the Great Zhou came about. It was no wonder that when the people of the 36 counties sent the People's Blood Letter, both the old and new parties chose to give in. If the imperial court completely lost the people's hearts, the state temples in the various counties would not be able to absorb psychokinesis. Naturally, there would be no way to send it to the ancestral temple, which would delay the condensation of the Emperor Qi. The 3 elders in the ancestral temple were members of the Shao royal family. Their status was extremely high, and their seniority was even higher than that of the previous emperor. The 3 of them were all at the peak of the 6th realm. It seemed that the old party's strength was still far stronger than the new party's. What the Zhou family relied on was their blood relationship with the Empress. Li Mu thought of a question and asked, Your Majesty, why don't you absorb the Emperor Qi yourself? Will it allow you to enter the 8th realm? Zhou blew on the tofu and said, No. Li Mu thought and said, But Your Majesty is so young. You can be the emperor for another 100 years. There's no need to pass the throne. Zhou said indifferently, Because I don't like it. Li Mu sighed. He only felt that it was unfair for her. She did not want to be the emperor, but she took on the responsibility of being the emperor. From the beginning to the end, when the Zhou family was planning, they never asked if what they gave was what she wanted. He asked casually, Your Highness, wasn't Prince Nanyang beheaded? What happened to his mansion? Prince Shou said, It was temporarily conferred by the imperial court. In the future, it may be awarded to officials who have made great contributions to the imperial court. Why are you asking this? Zhang Chun smiled and said, Nothing, I'm just asking. After returning to the secretariat, Li Mu didn't delay. He seized the time to draft the new rules of the Department of Consecration. After finishing his own business in the morning, he still had to show the Empress the memorials in the afternoon. Now, she didn't worry about the imperial court at all. She left the small matters to Li Mu, and they discussed the important matters together. If they agreed, they would listen to her. If they disagreed, they would listen to Li Mu. When Li Mu was dealing with the memorials, she was idling on the side. She even wanted Li Mu to write a few more books for her to read. It had to be said that she was already acting like a self-indulgent ruler, and Li Mu himself was about to become a favored official of a dictatorship. After the preliminary draft of the new rules of the Department of Consecration was finished, a familiar figure stepped into Li Mu's duty room. Mr. Mei looked a little tired. Li Mu poured a cup of tea for him and asked, What's wrong? Didn't sleep well last night? Mr. Mei sat in Li Mu's seat. He leaned against the chair and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He said, Last night I dealt with the internal guards until very late. Li Mu stood across from him and said, If it's not too important, just leave it to your subordinates. Look at Her Majesty. She should be busier than you, but look at her. She's very idle every day. If she's not admiring flowers, she's reading books. How long has it been since she touched the memorials? Mr. Mei glanced at him and asked, Her Majesty has only let you read the memorials for a few days, and you're already unwilling. Li Mu said, It's not that I don't want to. Anyway, if I do more, Her Majesty will do less. As long as she's happy, it's fine. She doesn't have to worry about the memorials, and give her inner demons an opportunity to take advantage of her. I suspect that her inner demons came from reading the memorials every day. Mr. May didn't continue this topic. He asked, "Did you say something again that made Her Majesty unhappy?" Li Mu said frankly, "I just said a few words of truth." Although the Empress's status was high, in the entire imperial court, there were only 3 people who could be considered her own: Shangguan Li, Mr. May, and Li Mu. The 2 of them listened to everything the Empress said. These truths that would make the Empress uncomfortable could only be said by Li Mu. Mr. May asked, "What did you say?" Li Mu honestly told him the conversation last night. Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "Do you think that because Her Majesty favors you so much, you can say anything?" Including the 2 remaining high consecrators, the current strength of the Great Zhou's consecration department was enough to wipe out most of the branch sects of the 10 demon sects. Li Mu came this time to inform everyone about the changes to the consecration department. Among them, the biggest change was their salary. The Great Zhou court was much more generous to the foreign consecrators than its own officials. Not to mention that every consecrator was allocated a residence of at least 2 courtyards. Their salary was also 10 times or even dozens of times that of ordinary officials. The resources that the high consecrators received from the imperial court every year were astronomical figures. From today onwards, the salaries of all consecrators would be lowered. They would be divided into several grades according to their cultivation, and each grade would have a basic salary. In addition to the basic salary, they would receive a commission based on the number of missions they went out on, and the degree of completion of the missions. How many resources they would receive in the end would depend on their own abilities. If they were more diligent, the resources they would receive every year would far exceed what they received before. This was to change the previous situation where many consecrators in the consecration department squandered resources. They lived in residences bestowed by the imperial court, and only came to the consecration department for a few days a year. They mingled in the various major entertainment venues of the divine capital. The annual salary from the imperial court, as well as the money they earned through their own abilities, could sustain their drunken and extravagant lives. Cultivation was dry and difficult. A portion of cultivators, because they could not bear this kind of loneliness, or because they did not have any hope of breaking through, would choose to indulge in pleasure. Li Mu could not control their pleasure, but he did not allow them to use the resources of the national treasury for pleasure. The things of the national treasury were the Empress's things. Although not all of the Empress's things belonged to Li Mu, sooner or later, some of them would belong to him. In this way, these consecrators were basically Li Mu's own resources. The salary reduction of the consecration department this time was only relative. In reality, their salary was still much higher than that of ordinary officials. The nature of the 2 jobs was different. The officials sat in the yamen, slacking and chatting, and a day would pass. Many times, the consecrators risked their lives, so they should receive more. Li Mu looked at the people of the consecration department and said, "The imperial court invests a great deal of resources here every year, and the consecration department does not support idle people. Which consecrator has an objection to what I said earlier?" The crowd was noisy for a moment, then finally quieted down. "What's not good about it?" Zhou said indifferently. "This place is not far from the secretariat, and it saves you the time of going to and from the yamen every day. I will let the imperial kitchen arrange 3 meals a day, and it will also save you the time of cooking. With this time saved, how many reports can you handle and how many things can you do?" Li Mu stared at her in a daze. Zhou indeed did not have the surname Bai. She was completely the Zhou Bapi of the Great Zhou. Even Zhou Bapi would cry if she heard of her exploitation of Li Mu. At this moment, Zhou continued, "Wanwan and Xiaobai should also stay here. When I have time, I can also guide them in their cultivation. A few months' time is enough for Xiaobai to advance to the five-tailed realm, and Wanwan will also advance to the fourth realm very soon. At that time, her spirit eyes will be even more powerful. Looking at Wanwan and Xiaobai's expectant gazes, Li Mu could not bear to say no in the end. He did not dare to, because although the Empress looked at him calmly, there was also an unquestionable threat in her calmness. Of course, the reason why Li Mu did not refuse was that he also saw the anticipation in the depths of the Empress's eyes. Although the Empress had everything, she had also lost everything. What she had was power and strength. What she had lost was family, friendship, and all the beautiful emotions in the world. No one would have such feelings for the Empress, except for the naive Xiaobai and Wanwan. Xiaobai was naive and innocent because she had not seen much of the world. And to Wanwan, if she was not given good food, the Empress would be the Empress. If she was allowed to eat as much as she wanted in the imperial kitchen, she would be the dearest big sister Zhou. The Empress was too lonely. She needed companionship more than anyone else. The existence of Wanwan and Xiaobai brought endless liveliness to this dead Chang'e palace. This liveliness was exactly what the Empress needed. Zhou looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you have any objections to what I said?" Li Mu bowed and said, "This subject obeys." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.